Okay, it's 2 o'clock, so we'll resume. I'll just say a few introductory words for those who have arrived this afternoon. I think you probably all know, but I'm William Fieldhouse, the inspector appointed by the Secretary of State to examine the plan. Reminder, please, for everyone to switch their phones and mobiles to silent. Test plan this afternoon. So if you're just going to walk the alarm, we will be to evacuate the building, exit through the doors there, and back round out through the main entrance and congregate at the end of the building behind me, opposite the ELR station. So this afternoon we've got two matters we're dealing with. And, matter 12, and some action that arose from considerations of the allocations and the green space and/or those. And then matter 15, which is waste management and utilities, which we'll dealt with. So there are some technical modifications to the plan that have been prepped by the council. The latest comprehensive version is in the document ED20, which is available on the examination website. That's updated on Friday or Monday, I can't remember which. Okay, so we'll go on to the table to introductions, and I'll just check to see if anyone's got any procedural queries before we start on that. So could I start with the council?
Naomi Pomfret, Principal Planner at the London Borough of Newham.
Lily Mahoney, Principal Planner for London Borough of Newham.
Helen Phillips, Principal Planner from London Borough of Newham. Sarah Karen, Senior Planner. Sally, Interim Planner. Rebecca Burns, Planning Director. Quad here on behalf of Sonia.
Bennett Ford, Senior Director of Quad here on behalf of Williams. Trey, here on behalf of Planning. So,
also the King's Council just here on behalf of the hotel. Tom Ellis, Director of Strategy.
Andrew Tesserman, Head of Planning on the Legacy Development Corporation.
Ramona Kiamdu, Planning Manager at LDC.
Okay, and I think we are expecting BLA, but I understand the train was really late. And we're also expecting representatives of Friends of West Ham Park. So he was here this morning, so hopefully he will return if he should participate. That we can lay that as we can do. I understand that GLA are in particular, as far as I can understand it, is in relation to East Ham Gas. Yeah, it's probably their interest. So we'll deal with those. So we're going to go through. Sorry, any procedural queries, questions? Start on the agenda items. Okay. Just we'll come back to the Metropolitan Open. I put AP23. That was provided in addition to the council's. It sets out its response to my question about the changes to Metropolitan Open Land. I don't know why actually, because you probably haven't done it. But anyway, apologies if you were just duplicated. You already done it. But my AP20 just asks you to make sure you change the boundary and the exception circumstances. So that is available. But we'll deal with that shortly in terms of the Metropolitan part of the GWS1. So we'll move on to GWS1, the green spaces. The context, which has been mentioned, but I'll just summarise some key points that I think the council's brought my attention. The borough has a low provision of publicly accessible children's play space and allotments. Yeah, and that's evidence in the I've got a document. And population growth that is projected and accommodated by the development of the plan will increase shortfalls. But to maintain current standards, total of 63 hectares would be needed to meet the population growth. So it's quite a considerable addition to what's already there. And I suppose just to think about that context, obviously the policies in the plan require allocations to provide green space, but I suspect they don't provide 68 hectares.
Not quite, but it is close. We have done that work. So
Right.
and it was about plugging the gaps. I think we explained
Yeah,
before business, and yeah, in terms of looking at the spaces that were missing and then providing those on sites that could accommodate the ways what the work that we've done. And I think that's the direction of travel that the
Okay, that's helpful. So the context, so it just comes back to that issue about the allocations and these this balancing act that the council has about optimising the provision of homes, other uses, green space. You know, it's seeing that in the round. Yeah. Okay. In terms of modifications, the modification proposed the implementation of text for GWS1 to clarify the requirement of green space and site allocations. So that arose, I think, from some of the discussion about the allocations. So that's there. If people wish to comment on that, they can do. The basic purpose is to provide a bit more flexibility in relation to what's shown on what's set in the policy and what's shown on the diagram. Yes. To provide that context. So does anybody want to comment on that particular modification? Otherwise, I'll go through my questions relating under GWS1 and question 12.1. But I'm going to do them in a slightly different order. I'm going to do question parts A, D, and E first, which are all about what's called green space plan, essentially. Then B and C, which are about metropolitan open land and green belts. Then finally F about the maintenance of new green space. It's just like reordering. So the first one is about the first one then is about the designation of each green space, including on the policy justified. So this is about the views people have about that. Before I look at this, some specific examples, two things. One, there's some modifications proposed, itemised in your statement and in the schedule. I've seen fall into two categories. I think you referred in your statement to 6 proposed changes to green space. And then there's an additional number of changes to what's community green spaces. Yeah, okay. But they're all now on these maps that were in the schedule. So we've got each of those and we can go through them. I know some of those changes relate to issues raised by, for example, Newham Hospital, but also Friends Across Town Park. So we'll pick up those as we need to in relation to the particular representations, but the others that aren't looking to speak about, you can just briefly explain why they're necessary in general terms. Okay, thank you. Right, but before we look at that, can we just make sure I understand what the definition of green space is? And then there's these other policies that overlay it, aren't they? They relate to different types, yeah? So green space in general, there's a definition in the glossary and in the implementation text. Basically, all vegetated open space it's private or public. They don't have to be publicly accessible. They can have a variety of benefits, purposes, values. Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. So when it says vegetated, and this is some examples of this.
Yes.
Obviously, generally you'll designate an area, if a park, say, or whatever else, and it'll be obviously known to be a mixture of form, won't it?
Yeah.
So when it says vegetated, it doesn't literally mean every square metre vegetated, does it?
No.
No.
But in addition, there are going to be smaller parcels that weren't mapped because it's every single thing. So we looked at the strategic parcels and map those where possible. Some will have non-vegetated areas on them, but broadly we've sought to align with the London plan definition. Okay, right. So that use the phrase vegetated? Yeah. No. Okay, fine. So we've got the definition relatively clear. The areas that are mapped then are what you call strategic. What's what are you attempting to map? So the map spaces are the parks, the amenity green spaces, natural and semi-natural green space, water infrastructure is mapped as well as part of border policy. Green corridors, sports fields, play space, growing space, including allotments, cemeteries and churchyards. What was excluded?
Yeah, excluded.
Yeah, was civic grey space, urban fringe, housing, estate green space, green roofs, private gardens, education green space, and meanwhile community growing space.
Right. But then, so if you've got one of those categories that is perhaps as a park or something, it'll be a mixture and it can change over time.
And some will be accessible and some won't be accessible. Yeah.
And the purpose of applying the policy to anything that meets that definition is that it's good and possible to have everything that's going to be there for the period. So it's mapped what's can. Insofar as the ones that you've excluded mapping, could any of those fall within the definition?
Green space.
Yeah.
Yes, they do.
They do.
They do fall within it. Gardens don't. But for example, education spaces do. So
Yeah. So the
but
policy.
the access is restricted to control in this area. We haven't designated and mapped them. But they do function as open space in terms of ecosystem services, but it's harder to put them into publicly accessible land in the future in terms of looking at the 0.72 category.
Okay. Right.
And we made a modification to clarify that in the sense that green spaces are to be protected.
Yes.
And we've also taken that through into the history as well.
Okay. Yeah.
To make that clear.
So, so the policy applies to the dark green areas that are on the policy map, but also potentially to ones that meet the definition when it comes to development. Okay. Right. So, my question was the reference to development and green space only being supported in exceptional circumstances.
Yes.
Well, exceptional circumstances is a free green belt. It's changing. Is that the right phrase?
I think we've taken that away, and following discussion before Christmas and looking at the policies around to make sure that it's clear, we've taken out, we propose FM094, clause 3, which now states, so that's
Green areas.
what page is that on? I've got the reference, not the 094, page 18. So picking up on the idea that all green spaces should be protected, but also taking back a proportional approach to that, noting that not all green spaces have the same value. We're now saying development resulting in the loss or reduction of existing green space, excluding metropolitan open land and greenbelt, will only be supported where the word exceptional circumstances, and then create what is publicly accessible green space efficiency, which is the you've got. And then the replacement green spaces provided are tidying up on site or where this is demonstrated to be unfeasible in the existing well-connected neighbourhood or in an area of identified publicly accessible green space. So the preference is that we'd like to see that green space provided back on the site, but we understand that that might not always be possible. So our preference is that it will be in that neighbourhood so that the community that has lost that green space will benefit from it, or if not possible, then in another area identified as intensive. And it should provide the equivalent of functionality that the green water infrastructure study looks at, and then introduce to retain the maximum physical quantity of the space to ensure no reduction in the overall usability, accessibility, recreational, ecological function of the space. And that's really to recognise that right, on some of the sites which have a lot of green space, but then enabling development has come forward, we want to retain the maximum amount. We want that to be demonstrated, but that a smaller amount may in some circumstances be better because it's more ecologically diverse, it can be used. A lot of our green spaces aren't accessible at the moment. So introducing some of that flexibility to the application of the policy.
Yeah, okay. No, thanks for that. That's helpful. Okay, understood. Right.
Your microphone's being used.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry about that, yeah, okay. Yes, a reminder, we can try and use the microphone. Thank you. Right, does anybody want to comment on, I'm going to go through some of the spaces and the issues that have been raised. Comment on any of those, well, 3 questions, A, D, and E, I suppose, and or the wording of policy, one related first. No, okay. So, first issue that was raised by Newham Hospital was the some of the areas around the grounds there, and I think there's been a modification proposed in relation to this. So that's to exclude the sort of areas that not typical. Is that right?
Yes, they're like incidental bits from land, and we, in terms of the work that was done, it was very fine good exercise to map everything. And I think in reflection, those elements do a functional GI, so they're not connected, they're not ecosystem services, and they're quite constrained and inaccessible, and some of them even a bit hard standing. So we've moved it back to being what the adopted green space boundary is within the local plan broadly. There's an element to the west which is now mapped that wasn't before. So yeah, that's it was just looking at that path again and making sure that it really met the criteria for mapping.
Okay, so when you did that in relation, it was an issue raised by Newham Hospital.
Yeah.
Did a similar exercise needed for any other areas?
No, we haven't identified any other, although there are some parcels that have been identified that were grey space, green space, and they're in the
Okay. You've seen the revised map,
Yeah.
presumably?
So, thanks to the council for classifying those internal components of the hospital, which were the points in question you were raising. We still have a fundamental concern about the GWS1 allocation across the broad swathes of the site. We are a hospital that was built at a time when we had population viewing was circa 260,000, it's forecast at 5,000. We also serve large swathes of Barking and may have a significant population growth there as well. Many of whom will look to us as their local hospital, not Queens or Kings. So we have a hospital that we would argue is too small for current and certainly we need to grow and reconfigure over the coming decades to cope with population growth in Europe. We fully accept plan permission will be a requirement. We're also really conscious of, I'll give you an example of this. Quite often the NHS funding streams are available in short order, and you have to act quick. So, for example, we have built a new MRI in the hospital this year. We were given 1 year to accept the funding, build the MRI, which is in current footprint, so didn't need planning permission. But that's from a standing start, a £4 million scanner in our building. It's really complicated. If we had to go through multiple layers of planning, the risk is that we wouldn't have to turn down the £4 million because we wouldn't be able to complete the work in time. So we're not arguing against planning, but we're arguing for the GW1S puts an additional burden, not just being able to completely agilely address population growth in the market, actually provide a quality of service that people can see in their local hospital.
Understand the point, but you're not suggesting that the hospital should be exempt from any sort of policy and restriction of good design, good layout.
The planning commission is required for all major works, but you want the maximum flexibility to be able to use the land to reconfigure over the coming decades. We work quite well with the council, the building relationship with the council. We've had some work ongoing on in terms of fire remediation. organisation of the hospital. So we fully accept to work with them.
Yeah.
We're just trying to aim for the maximum flexibility to give us the ability to respond nimbly and agilely to funding streams as they're available.
Well, the flexibility could be provided by removing all your green space designation and letting you just, deal with that on a whatever ad hoc basis, I suppose, or build something into the policy that gives you a letter. But I mean, the policy has a process to go through, doesn't it?
It does, and the modification FM094 recognises that some sites might be constrained by the existing green space, and that some reorganisation of that green space would be public benefit, not least through critical infrastructure such as the hospital, but also improve usable green space for the patients of the hospital and also the staff. And that's the intention.
Yeah, so there is a peg to hang on in that modification. In terms of the mapping, you picked up some things that the council acknowledged, yes, it went too far in some of these internal areas. Are you broadly content that the mapping now is reasonable in terms of it's more focused on the larger?
Yeah, there are still some strips of, really quite thin strips.
Yeah.
The mapping that, again, we would argue has little or no environmental benefit, ecological benefit, is mainly scrub. It's not accessible by the public, but it's still being given the GW1S designation. We can happily point out those areas for the council. Some of the bigger areas we certainly accept. So to west of the entrance, there's a big patch there. We were proposing that gets designated. We want to do some interesting things around healthy placemaking. But there are still some critical land, little pockets of land that really help. And just an example would be in terms of we have an emergency department that was built for around 300 people a day. We regularly this winter are getting 500 people a day to that emergency department. We will need to reconfigure it. We will need to expand and grow it somehow. There is a sort of roundabout of green space outside one of the two entrances is designated that would be helpful if it wasn't designated. That's the largest single space that we like to see keep designated. We understand the reason why it's because it's a substantial amount of land within footprint.
That policy allow that if that was proposed to put forward that extension to the building, that would be then you'd be where can you replace that bit. Yeah. Okay, understood. Okay, thank you. Right, so next brings me on to West Ham Park, which we talked about, seems like some time ago now, where this is a registered parking garden. Yeah. And it's subject to a number of overlaying designations, which it's got the green space one, and then it's got some areas that are darker green, which are recreation spaces within the green space, and then the hatched area is on top of that. Central.
Oh no, mall.
It's
proposed for mall.
Proposed for mall. Oh, yeah, that's right. Interesting way, isn't it? That's right.
Yeah, exactly that.
So it's getting enhanced protection there. But the area in dispute that the council act has been included in the green space.
At Regulation 19, we mapped it as a community growing space, reflecting the last commercial nursery.
Okay.
And the fact that the historic grade 2 listing doesn't bring the nursery into the
I think that's the issue, isn't it? I think what you're saying is if you applied your approach to community growing spaces consistently, and this was just that little area, it wouldn't meet the definition. But it seems to me this is somewhat different. And it's that area, yes, it was a community growing space, but that's surely not the full justification why it could be included as green space. But it's an part act on the historic England registered parking garden, which in itself is a good enough reason to designate green space. So you propose it is green space. The question to me is it sound for that to be? Is that not justified? It's not sound for that to be. And you looked at the rep from the City of London who own it,
Yes.
and thought, well, yes, maybe we can't justify it because the community green space issue. Okay, so that's where we are, which is the same discussions we had last time. And I asked questions about, well, is it part of the registered park garden? And the answer is yes. So we provided a map and the listing, and it's referred to in the listing description of historic uses. I asked you about the actual character of it, and you told me it's all part of a fence. You know, if you go and look at an area, it's all part of it. So I think we're having the same discussion as we had last time, and the council's position is, well, it's shown as green space. The change was proposed. You haven't withdrawn that change. We acknowledge that the justification for its inclusion is somewhat different from some of the other green spaces. Okay. Right, so leave it with me. No, that's all right. It's not a job after all. Do you want, yeah, Friends of West Ham Park, do you want to?
Yeah, just a few points.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of this was said at the previous meeting, so I don't want to totally repeat things.
No.
But I'm chair of the Friends Park, and we have a sort of very split and paranoid relationship with the corporation of the City of London, who are the owners of the park. I mean, very briefly, the history was that in 1874, the Gurney family, who were a very rich local family, moved up to Norfolk and sold the grounds of their big house, paid for partly by the Gurneys giving a big discount, partly by the Corporation of London, and partly by public money raising, and that provided the finance for the park to be set up. The Corporation of London in 1874 accepted then that they would be in perpetuity liable for the costs of providing public park there. Now, the park itself, when it comes to the nursery, the nursery in a way has really famous traditions. It goes back to John Fothergill, who was a famous botanist in the late 18th century. There was always a sort of nursery there for the big house. When it became a public park, that continued. Over the years, the size of that nursery has been very much increased by at least 3 times. The area that it now covers, a tarmac, concreted and glass house area, is at least 3 times what it was when the park was initially set up. Now, for many years, until 2016, the nursery in West Ham Park provided plants, some for new, but primarily for the Corporation of London, for giving events, planting in the City of London, and it was a very active, successful nursery. In 2016, the Corporation of London decided that it would be cheaper to buy plants from Netherlands and change the plants a bit, and they closed the nursery down, without, however, making any budgetary allowance for decommissioning costs of quite a big nursery, a big glasshouse area. So we learned, without any consultation from the Corporation of London, that they had decided to sell off the nursery land for housing development shortly before COVID, and that this was a decision that could not be gone back on. It was an irrevocable decision. No point talking about it. We've decided. But, you can imagine our reactions. That was really extremely negative, and this remains the case because that remains their position. Now, albeit they say they're going to sell it off for apartment building. They tried actually shortly after COVID. There were notices put up, and there was an agent, Savills, were appointed agents for progressing this sale. Now that fell through. We don't quite know why. Getting any information from the Corporation of London,
is quite close to blood and stuff. So we don't really know what happened there, but we were extremely relieved to, in the draft local plan, to see that the nursery area was recognised really for the first time properly as protected green space. And we were very happy to hear that. We were then a bit dismayed rather, to read the 5-page legal letter that the Corporation of London sent to Newham objecting to this designation. And of course, we can't not be aware of the financial weight of the Corporation of London in terms of legal contestations, and the fear that Newham feels it has to back off in the face of the overwhelming finance of the Corporation of London. Now, maybe that's not the case.
Okay.
That's the back.
Yeah, I've got it. And a lot of that I heard last time. Just in terms of this legal letter, is that attached as one of the
There's a Reg 19.
yeah, exactly that. I think
I'll check whether or not there's an additional letter that was sent to us outside of the Reg 19, but they did address it.
yeah, I'm aware of that. Yeah. I can't remember what that's about. In terms of the statutory park, registered park garden, that requires a separate permission process to the planning commission process. But that can be obtained, and this would strengthen protection if it was designated as green space, whatever that process is. Yeah. And in terms of when the mole hatching on this overlap, so you've got the park in its entirety submitted is green space, and that's exactly the same boundary as the registered parking garden, or
It's the same as the existing designated green space. It doesn't extend into the allotment, the nursery site. The nursery site hasn't extended into that.
the mole does.
No.
What is there a reason for that?
Well, there was having a sort of legal advice, I think it's before Christmas, thought that it would make sense to bring the mole boundary into including the nursery site, but that would have been an amendment that was done after Reg 19, and so it would be done in with the GM.
Why did you map the mole as it was, including a small part of park?
The mole review initially just drew it to the existing, they felt that the boundary of the openness was the existing park. But I think on reflection, we looked at it again, given that some areas of mole do include nursery sites and the affinity parks, for example, that it could be extended, but at this point in the plan examination, we were unable to make that amendment.
No. Okay, so we are where we are, and it's understood. So, right, okay, I think I've got it. I'll decide whether the plan needs to be modified to remove it, not whether it's justified as designated as green space. So, thank you, and you've explained it very well. And it was helpful, to see the actual listing for the parking garden and see the map. So, thank you very much. Right. I've got another one that I want to discuss with you, the Thames Water referred to, which is another allotment site that Mill needs. It's operational land, it's temporarily leased as an allotment. But from your point of view, you've looked at this and it meets the criteria for green space. And it would be the same sort of process as the hospital. If for operational reasons it needs to be developed, well, you go through this process of assessing it and minimising the loss of green space or value, etc. So it's the same. Because, I mean, landowners can always make a case for why their bit is completely not green space any longer. It's a process.
Operation on the site, so
Right, thank you for that. Anything else? So the other changes to the green space mapping then, which have fallen into the different categories, they're basically just a reassessment. The education one was the intent mapping, correct?
that was a
Because you've said that there should have been two, so that picks up most of them. Then there's community growing ones. Then meanwhile, so if we took the example of the Thames Water allotments, why aren't they meanwhile? They're temporary.
they are allotments in operation area, they're established allotments, whereas the meanwhile uses are more like my incidental land, or they've set up, but they're temporary, they're not a registered allotment.
So when the Thames Water say these were temporary leases, that could have been going on for years or decades.
Yes, the spaces that we've removed are more community pop-ups, space, community growing space, but that again, it's not to say that they wouldn't be protected by Green Water Space 1. We still think they're protected, it just haven't been mapped. We were just trying to think of an approach, and that mapping inconsistency was picked up at a later stage, and we just wanted to make sure.
Right. So these changes that are in the schedule, they would all be changes to the policy. They wouldn't change the plans because they're not shown. So they just get down as on the list of changes to the policy. Yeah. Right, thank you. Anything else on green space before I move on to green belt? Paul? No. Okay. So green belts. This plan makes no changes to the limited areas of green belt in Europe.
No.
So there's no issue there. That's confirmed. Right. Which brings us on to the areas of metropolitan urban land. So we'll deal with this. We'll deal with this in the chain. So in terms of the response to AP 23, and indeed your hearing, your matter 12 statement, basically itemizes, I think, 10 changes to metropolitan land. Three areas where the detail boundary has changed.
Yes.
Areas that have been removed from metropolitan land.
So at Reg 19,
Yeah.
there's a difference between Reg 19 and subsequent to the hearing that we had in discussion with the East Ham.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in terms of Reg 19, there was an amendment to A20, which is the Langdon Academy, to the boundary amendment. There was a boundary amendment to A21, which is the East Ham, which we'll come on to later.
Yeah.
Further amends. And A32, which is the local property value. There was a release of green belt mall at A39 Alfred Way Open Space Park, and new proposed mall designations at A33 West Ham Park, A34 Thames Barrier Park, A35 Waterworks River Corridor, and then there was a small parcel to the east of City Mill, which is essentially an extension to an existing A32 parcel.
And the exceptional circumstances for each of those changes is itemized in the document. So it's okay.
That document goes further because it takes into account the past.
Yeah, well, we'll come on to, let's leave East Ham Gasworks and the more change there till we get to that agenda item. So that's fine. So I don't think there's any, there is a Thames Water objection to Mall on its land at the Beckton sewage treatment works. That's existing Mall.
No, it's actually, is that mall or is it sink?
It refers.
That is an existing mall.
Yeah, it's not changed.
No, it's not changed.
So it's, yeah.
Yeah, no, thanks.
I've got the, yeah.
I'm getting my sink mall.
Yeah, well, I think there is a sink.
There's a sink later on.
Yeah, there's a sink issue later on. Yes.
Yes, no, that is,
This is
adopted. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
That's
so, I mean, they say they object to it and it's operational and they consider there are exceptional circumstances removed, but it's other than it may be needed for operation. Right, okay. So any points on Mole in terms of, so go on to these. So in terms of then future maintenance of new green space, I mean, so William, you raised an issue about the presumption that it would be handed over to the council.
yeah.
Thank you. I knew you were here for a purpose, Mr.
Thank you. I think the gist of our comments was that ideally we'd like to see the policy revised to acknowledge it's not the default scenario that a local park transferred to the council for management. So the Berkeley Group, for example, pride themselves on the delivery of their landscape and their open space, and that includes the ongoing maintenance of that space. So I think as it feels like that would be the default scenario. I think there is some flexibility already, but whether that could just be considered again, make it clear that that's not the solution for management and local parks and open space.
Isn't that allowed for by the last sentence? It just says it really acknowledges it can be a different approach, but it just needs the management to try it.
Which
Sorry, are we looking at part 5 of GDPR? Yeah. Well, the very last sentence is where it is agreed that public accessible green space will not be adopted.
Yeah.
Okay. So it can happen. We want to manage it to deal with it. So,
No, I think we did agree with that interpretation.
yeah. Right. Thank you. Right. Anything else on GWS1? Right. No. Let's move on to water spaces. Newham has significant areas, and I enjoy walking on one in the sunshine at lunchtime. Right. So GWS2. Specifically tailored to this, and there are objections on this issue of Good Hotel here to explain what their concern is. So I've read the described the facility and the benefits you said there is. So, well, do you want to just elaborate on what it is, and I suppose focusing on what the plan needs to do differently? I think you're saying it's missing something that can be significant that it doesn't actually deal with that.
Yeah, but by all means, sir, actually bear with me because I need to give you a few references. But if I can ask you to just mentally ask yourself a sense check in relation to policy when you look at it, both in its original form and some of its modifications. One might ask oneself that where you have a vessel and you want to moor the vessel alongside the docks, which has been happening since the 1850s in the location where my client site is, to what extent does the policy say that's a good thing or a bad thing? Or if it's for a particular purpose, is that a good thing or a bad thing? That's the acid test of policy which relates to docks. At Reg 19 stage, my clients, Rodmer and the Royal Victoria Docks, all made representation that GWS2 was not specific enough given the nature of the area of the Royal Victoria Docks within which my client site is. And you get that in a number of different points. You get that in paragraph 7.38 of document E65, which is referred to variously in the documentation. Green and Water Study 2024 and the Green and Water Infrastructure Study 2025. Most of the documentation, but I may be wrong. No. It's the second document. Okay. But certainly you get that from 7.38, the nature of that. You also get it from page 374 of the official version of the local plan, which is N2, N for November 2. And that's perhaps worth pausing at for a moment because that identifies the nature of the already area, the dock specifically with the dock within that area, is to be transformed. But what the plan seeks to do is to make the most of the water, and that knits the neighbourhoods together, and that the neighbourhood will continue to be home to visitor attractions. And within the criteria that follows on from N2, N25C says that part and parcel of what that vision will be supporting new and enhanced visitor economy uses of an appropriate type of scale for the local centre or the dock centre. So the visitor element that are supported generally in the vision, but it's a visitor matters in relation to a local centre, which is said to be of particular relevance there. Somewhat odd, but anyway, what then looks toward the dock itself. The question that you answered is whether there's consistency with the local plan.
you'll see in our representation. So I'll just briefly summarize the point. Policy SI17, so SI17 of the local plan, and paragraph 9.
Sorry, local plan.
Sorry, the London plan.
London plan, yeah.
I write LP down.
Yeah. SI.
Local plan. SI17.
Yeah.
Both council and also my site, and it's on page 398 of the plan. So I would invite you to look at that policy, particularly criteria D, and particularly paragraph 9.17.2. It's paragraph so that we put it in our representations. D, SI17, it says development proposals into the waterways, including permanently moored vessels, stand by my particularly interested in status, should only be supported for water-related uses or support enhancements of water-related uses. So you've got two different ways of at 9.17.2, is to do a fairly clear analysis in our representations to say that doesn't preclude moored vessels. What it requires you to do is to the second part of criteria D, and are we supporting enhancement of water-related uses? In other words, it doesn't require a permanent vessel to just simply pull up and permanently moor there. It requires you to do something else. The question is whether you're doing sufficient in relation to that. And 9.17.2 tells you pretty much in turn that that's what's intended. It should only be permitted for water-related uses, and then says ancillary uses such as bars, etc., can support enhancements of water use as well as important access to or on waterways. Waterways should not be used as an extension of developable land. So you don't just extend out to great land there. You've got to be doing something more. Nor should be a continuous line of water ground. So you can't have what you've got in the 1940s photograph, which is just outside of the corridor.
I'm not telling you.
Or a continuous line of water ground, which you had adopted by the board of their existence after the piers were removed from the middle of it. So it's not a preclusion in the plan. You have to ask yourself the question then whether or not that approach, cautious approach, which is positive, reflected in the submission version of the local plan. And that's why certainly we say there are problems. There are some elements, such as main modifications in 6, which reflects the last word of paragraph 9.17.2. The waterways should be used as an extension of the land, or should they be continuous land crash? That's great, although you observe that paragraph is not part of policy. But there are other problems, and those other problems, I'm afraid, don't pick up exactly the sort of positive approach, a cautiously positive approach of the London plan. We pointed particularly to main modification 75.1. What we were hoping to see after the Royal Victoria Docks had said we need a policy specific to this area, because this area has got a particular character of itself. Next to us, as Mr. Perry will tell you about in course, we've got hotels in this location, we've got links to the business in this location. What we were hoping for was a specific policy which would pick up how you use the water to facilitate that positive context. That's not happened, and in fact, what we've actually got, instead of positive approach, even a cautiously positive approach or a conditionally positive approach, we've actually got a retrograde approach. So if you search main modification 75.1.
Which page is it? 722. It's not next to that, so it is in two.
Design until the last, I marked up the previous version. So if you look at the 20, so the A documents rather than 20 documents that preceding one is on page 15.
So I can use that one. So, change.
No, the text has to change because the things to be added in.
Yeah.
And this using fees that you always get to the local plan because there's expansive the last time I met Servo changed something about the basis.
Sorry, which page is ED 28?
ED 28,
50.
50. Yeah. In fact, they're all together here.
Yeah. No, this is really useful, this one. That's why Martin.
Yeah, okay, carry on.
Look at MO751, you'll see that the big change is D, which requires no encroachment or covering of any water space, unless it is a water related or water dependent use. So not facilitating water dependent use, it has to be water dependent use. Development proposals to impound or narrow water spaces will not be supported. So if you have something which falls into criterion D of SI 17 plan, something which involves a mooring of a craft, let's say a sauna, a floating sauna, or something of that nature, if you've got a craft which facilitates something which is a water-related use, under this approach, it will be precluded. And under the original version of GWS 2, which is of course what you are examining, was when you have a bullet amendment, you have to remember that. Under the original one, it's not supported. So it's got worse so far as we're concerned, not but so worse as far as we're concerned. N2 is not the answer, because N2 does no more than recognise that and tells us this attraction's got to go to local centres, which seems strange, but there we are, we've got the precursor to it, and it's all about how we've got this attraction in this area. And you've got then modifications, which tells you if you cover any bit of the water at all, and you're not actually one of those specific uses, then you're contrary to the policy, and that can't be consistent with the London Plan. Nor can it be consistent with the supporting text of the London Plan, which I accept is not part of the policies of the London Plan. It tells you something about its intent. So forget about any application which my clients may or may not have made. If you have something which falls within SI 17, i.e. it is a form of development which does result in a vessel floating on water in a dock, which has a mooring, which is a long-term mooring, nothing's permanent in this world, and that facilitates extensive water-related and water activation uses, then that would fall foul of the amended version of GWS 2, and it would be supported by SI 17, and that can't be right. What's even more startling, and this is perhaps the big sense check, is try and weave your way through the policy with what am I meant to do with a craft on the water in the Royal Docks? That should be, frankly, the easiest thing that you should see in relation to policy of this nature. Specifically, what should I do for mooring a craft in this part of the Royal Docks, which has this attract within it, where there is a port or hotels, see the cable car, see the O2, see the XL. What am I to do with that?
Okay, so, yeah, sorry.
In a better world, and we don't live in a perfect world, but in a better world, there would be a clear text which would say, this is what you do in relation to watercraft. Even if it's going to be said against us, well, yes, you weave your way through this element to go to this bit, do this, to this flexibility. And I grant you could perhaps just about argue that in relation to this, as indeed my clients are arguing on that application at the moment. That doesn't make the policy sound. It certainly doesn't make the policy fair. And in terms of its justification, it actually makes it downright inconsistent with the provision. Just in relation to both parts of the question, that's the fairness fails and the soundness requirement is failed. And this could be so much better.
Just, thank you. So just going back to SI 17,
Yes,
I actually think I examined this business plan. I remember this. Anyway, that's by the by. So I'm just thinking about what it does support. It's water related. I'm just getting back to the paragraph you referred to. Line.
to be clear, our point of consistency relates to policy.
Yeah, but,
Because that's what counts.
yeah, and the policy part is big. Sorry?
It's 398, sir.
Yeah, I've got it. I was just looking at that. It's part D you referred to, didn't you? What, permanent board vessels? Water related use of sports. Yeah, okay. So I think the question of the council is, are you trying to do something different, or are you happy for this London Plan Policy D to be applied to the youth?
We're intending to take a consistent approach.
Yeah, okay. So there's no, I'm trying to be more restrictive. No, okay. Fine, that helps. So in that sense, do you understand the point that the hotel make it?
I do, but I think we've tried to be consistent with the plan approach. Is it specifically just the boarded enhancement of board related is that missing? That's not there.
Well, suppose if you took policy here, in the London Plan, sorry, part D of SI 17, it allows it's development proposal into the waterways, including the permanent moored vessels. So that's the case in point. Should generally only be supported for water-related uses or to support water-related uses. If you applied that to you, and the proposal comes along to permanent or a vessel, does this policy put obstacles in the way of that?
So it says requiring no encroachment or covering of any water space unless it's a water related or water dependent use. There's a difference in that term. Development posted in pound or narrow water spaces will not be supported. And it's obviously we're balancing the EA as well as their concerns and the fact that there are different water space policy for the whole of the borough. It's a strategic approach. There are parks, there are other areas of the borough that could have their own policies, their own SVDs, but this is the policy to do with all places. And so this is the balance we've taken, and we've sought to replicate the London Plan, and we've also provided clarification and aligning with it and aligning with the London Plan. And it's just important to raise about the GLA. Don't see this as a committee issue. The Royal Docs were happy with we did statement of common ground with them, and they were happy with our approach with regards to the additional tax and the fact that because it's really the space, the Royal Docs needs to be treated in the neighbourhoods, and we agree with the lack of recognition of the water space, which is why we've introduced those clauses within the three neighbourhoods that have the docks, and that's the appropriate place within this plan to deal with it. Mod MO75.4 also elaborates that it says should not result in the encroachment or covering of water space unless for a water-related or water-dependent use, ancillary water-related or water-dependent uses such as cultural, sport, or recreational facilities can be supported and support the enhancement of water space and public realm. The siting of facilities needs careful consideration so that navigation, hydrology, biodiversity, and the character, access to and use of water is not compromised. Water space should not be seen as an extension of developable land in Newham, nor to be part of a continuous load of Moorcraft, and that's lifted from the plan. We've sought to align as closely as possible to the other plan, obviously inserting when you.
Okay. I understand the point about this GWS2 being a policy about waterways generally, water space in general, sorry, and not just docks or any particular docks. So I understand that. In terms of the neighbourhood policies that relate to docks, a number of them, that would be 7. So the example here was N2.
N2.
Yeah, so this is the area you're in, but the same would apply to other ones, and it may be slightly different approaches. We talked about keys and things, and relationship with the water there. So what you're saying is that the N2 discussion on which is the box after the N2 vision, where it says the vision will be achieved by, that's the policy.
That's the bit that says local visitor facilities should be close to local centres.
Yes, I don't think that works for that particular issue. Okay.
can take that away.
Yeah.
It was in, so there were modifications done because we recognised the importance of the dogs. I mean, it's just to say that the local plan originally, the adopted one doesn't even have a policy on water, surprisingly. So we do think it's incredibly important to recognise the importance of water and to activate the water, but it has to be done appropriately, and it is for water-dependent, water-related uses, and should be seen as a land, and that's quite clear within the London.
Yes.
And that's what we've recognized. And that's the approach we've taken. And the mods to N1 Northwood Division, the N2 Royal Victoria, N3 or Albert sought to address the concerns for them not being a bespoke Royal Docs policy.
Okay. In terms of water-related uses, then the London Plan also brings in the ancillary uses. So that you're saying that's the wording that you use. Okay. I think I understand the issue. Sorry, do you want to say anything further?
Well, yes, if I may.
Yeah.
I'm not asking you to set up, but when you look at the schedule of representations at Reg 19, I would ask you to just have a look at what Rodman and what the Royal Victoria Docs said at that time, because start playing around. But we've got from important to new plans better recognising the unique character of the Royal Docs and the nature of this area, which suggests the role of Royal Victoria Dock deserves a bespoke policy to provide a clearer policy framework. To give you a flavour of this, if I sail a boat, I'm sitting watching a few of them at lunchtime. If I sail a boat through the Royal Docks to the Royal Victoria, and I anchor it in some way, I'm plenty of water-related use. If I temporarily moor a boat alongside the docks, I'm plenty of water-related use. I might have a vessel which is a water-related use. The difference is that it's a permanent mooring in relation to so it was initially a temporary mooring, then it became a permanent mooring by permission. They seek to do the same thing again. If all they were doing was pulling up alongside for a bit and then sailing away in relation to any other vessel, then it would not be arguably a water-related use. The London Plan makes a difference, having pointed out that there are a significant number of permanent boats and vessels around the whole of London. That there are some circumstances in which permanent mooring should be restricted, i.e. a water-related use of having a vessel on water should be restricted. The nature of that restriction is SI 17. What W2 does, accidentally you'll see, is provide, just on a straight interpretation, a less favourable context for something that falls within SI 17. And we're told that's not intended. But I go one step further than that. The role of the London local plan is to provide the flesh on the bones of the London plan itself. Seems to work out quite well in terms of many local plans. But that's the intention of it. So it should be clearer what I'm meant to be doing in relation to a permanently booked vessel in the local plan than it is here. It's more opaque. And if the flesh is meant to be on the bones in relation to N2, then it's N2 that needs to be modified significantly to tell what I'm doing in relation to port vessels. And as I said, from my understanding, from my client's understanding, previous decision of this authority, the intention is that if you're having a permanently moored vessel, then it has to be far more than simply being permanently moored. It's meant to be doing something, for example, providing physical accommodation, for example, providing floating walkways, whatever it may be. It's that consistency and that positivity that I think is the issue. And the particular context of this quadrant of the Royal Victoria Docks, also the justification as to why you wouldn't do that. And that's certainly not what the council are suggesting. They're suggesting they can quite be confident that N2 is intended to do that, though it's not broken.
Right, understood. I think. Sorry, is there anything further you want to say?
I was just checking.
Yeah,
while he's wearing his good hotel.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay. Okay. So, let me think about this. I think the question. I think when you started from was about a sense check about really if the plan is to have a framework that's positive, effective, for the example of a permanently moored vessel. What is it clear what the approach is?
we feel it is, it reflects London plan that it's supported water-related uses or enhancements of water-related uses.
Leave it there, I'll look at N2. Which of the neighbourhoods?
It's,
N1, N2 and N3.
and just to state that the Royal Docs team obviously did put their Reg 19 representation in, but subsequently after the Reg 19, we have a statement from Bradley, which is SOC 006, which where they support use of direct water uses with it.
Yeah, I can say that because as you say, this is the type of wants it's the specific N2, well, N2, N1 and N3. It's there in those policies, and if necessary, the allocations. I suppose I don't think the allocations actually deal with this.
So I don't know if it helps, but let me share with you the specific sense check that was put to me, which was the HMS Belfast, Newham, and it's a tourist attraction that's been there since the late 1990s. The Royal Docs was thought to be appropriate. On the basis of this, it wouldn't be allowed to be. That can't be right.
Well, it may or may not be right for a go that big. I don't know.
But
I understand the point.
Sense check we should have.
Yeah, it's a. Yeah. Okay.
If it was to be a visitor attraction of a boat that was sailing on the water, it would be a water-related use. It would be a water.
It was permanently warned.
Something
Or
else.
it seems more restrictive.
It's encroaching upon the space and therefore falls foul of criteria D as amended.
It says unless it's a water-related or water-dependent use, so I don't agree. It says require no encroachment or covering of any water space unless it is a water-related or water-dependent use. It's echoing the approach to the London plan.
So if it's suggested that a permanent mooring is a water-related use, then my clients can go out and high five because I didn't understand that was what was being intended. I thought the intention was
A hotel,
no, a vessel.
I don't want to get into the intricacies of the planning application.
No.
Yeah.
Of course, what do you room on? My clients are involved.
Well, so the use of a vessel, a boat, as a bar or a restaurant or some sort of visitor attraction, could be a water-related use. Yeah.
It's developed, but the London plan does then want to say in paragraph 9.72 that they should be not an extension of developable land in London. So it's whether or not that use needed to be in the water.
It would be a different offer, wouldn't it? I mean, it would. Well, I suppose that's the question to the council. Is it positive in the sense that does the council want to accommodate such permanent moorings, provided all the safeguards are met, etc.
Provided the safeguards are met and we don't let a continuous line of more development or protection is therefore, and that's the approach policy which is consistent with the London plan.
So maybe there's not that much difference between you.
I've got a very careful note for the vessel related use on the waste interpretation. I'm very grateful for that. The issue, as I understand it, that's just responded to, is the suggestion of recent justification to the London plan to SI 17, but not creating land extending the built form into the docks. That's part of the recent justification as case law, Churchley Valley case, which says that the recent justification is not policy. That's not an additional criterion. If there was a criterion of SI 17, you cannot have a point of order, an extension of the built form, then that would have been a very different policy, and that's not what the policy says. What it says is that there's a caution in relation to that. So if this doesn't become built form, it's got to do something more than that. Yeah. Surely the line of not having a line of permanent or vessel ground is not important. That's part of the justification.
But it could be a policy test in Newham.
It could, if there's justification.
Yes, there's justification for it, yes. The extension of the land built form is ambiguous what it means and what it's trying to prevent. I suspect it's trying to prevent where you've got a use and you just want to extend it out. That's not the same thing as a water-related use, really.
If you've got a private pier, like you have in some of the lakes districts, where you've got an extension of the bath and a hotel, which happens to fix itself on one of the piers, nobody can use the pier, you can't moor against the pier. It's just an extension to avoid the fact that people are overfilled. So that's the sort of thing.
Yes.
And to create floating grass to just do that. You can see what's the yard, you can actually space where things of that nature. But when you're actually dealing with a vessel, which is a permanent vessel, the approach is thou shalt not do it unless you fall within the two criterion of the policy.
Okay.
And that's really important.
Okay, thank you.
Get best by repetition. So,
No, we've got the point, and I think there's some. I'll have a think about it, and I think that the intention isn't necessarily very different. It's just getting an effective approach. Yeah. Okay.
It's about also protecting the openness of the water and being proportionate, because these are special things. The water itself, even if it's not being used, gives space between buildings and views into it. So it's taking the approach that the London plan did consistently and thinking we also want people to use the water space. It's incredibly important. It is underutilised. We do recognise that, and that was the balance the policy was trying to consider all of those elements.
Yeah. Yeah. So you wouldn't, clearly you wouldn't want docks to be filled up with these all along the sides and everything there. Right. Good. Okay. Right. So I think there will be an action point when I think about it. How it may be that. Well, no, leave it for that for today. So, okay.
can I just say, and this may or may not be you asked the question about our very assets, what we want. Our statement doesn't actually set out what we want in terms. If you would like to, I'll through you to the council for us to set out the sort of thing we are after. Would that be a helpful course of action?
Thank you for the offer. I will clarify whether that's it. I mean, I think, in other action points, I've suggested that you liaise with or whatever, various things go down or whatever the term is. But there's any action point that I put to you, you're perfectly free to talk to whoever it is if it will help. Or I may say explicitly do that. But anyway, okay. Right, thank you. I don't know if there's anything else on the water policy. So, no, let's move on. If you feel you finished and you wish to go, you're free to go. But you're welcome to stay. So it's up to you. I probably won't be having a break for 15 minutes.
Well, definitely might be so if you would forgive me.
No, that's fine.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thanks. Let's move on to GWS 3, biodiversity. So, yeah, okay. Well, the policy itself, if anybody's got any detailed wording, I think Sir William raised a few issues about detailed wording, but can we start with the sink designations? We talked about these on some of the allocations, and there seems to be some cases where there's a designation that will have to change. The way that it's going to be master planned and developed and landscaped, etc. But the rationale for the designation at the starting point reflects the mapping and the work that's done, essentially what's there now. Yeah. So that's still the council's position. The fact that it's going to change, you can't draw a new line for the moment. So it's mapping out what's there, and that's the starting point.
And that's what's there. And the policy has flexibility with regards to mitigation, which is other plans.
Okay. So I know you've both got issues about this. So let's start LLDC. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Yes, LLDC remains concerned about the proposed extension of the sink designation to the Bridgewater site, which forms part of NEB 16. And the mapping for this is on page 58 of the April 25 sink by London Nature. We have been talking to the borough about this throughout the regulation 18 and 19 process, where we had issues about the clarity of the mapping and the lack of justification for such detention at this location. But that was done based on the 2022 report, which was the at that time. As we made it clear then in our original representation of this examination, this proposed designation flips directly with proposals for housing on site and proposals which have benefited from outline planning permission since 2012. The most recent planning permission was granted in 2023, and over the course of the past 12 months, the team have been working very closely with the borough's development management colleagues to discuss a reserve matter application which is due to be submitted shortly. About a third of the site's housing capacity is due to be located over the proposed designation, so about 230 units have been proposed. As this is an agreed location for some of the site taller elements. At no point during these pre-app discussions does the location of these buildings at this location be raised as an issue, but an inability to deliver these units to this location will almost certainly make this development site unviable. Following our second stage statement of common ground, we were told by the borough that a detailed justification for this site in this particular location would follow, and a further report by the Wildlife Trust was published in April 2025. However, if we look at the table 5 of the 2022 and 2025 reports, justification for the changes to NEB 16 seems identical. Likewise, the detailed analysis of NEB 16 within Appendix 3 of the reports also appears in the 2022 report, although that the 2025 report does include more detailed mapping of the proposed extension area. We would therefore request, principally on the basis that this conflicts with the existing planning permission, but also because of the lack of site-specific justification of this designation over the Bridgewater site. Thank you.
In table 5, I've got it here, which can tell me the reference number for
NEB 16.
Then William, do you want to outline yours again?
Yeah, very simple comments to what you just heard. So there were 2 sites in question, and perhaps we might pick up back tomorrow, but I'll run through the.
Yeah.
We have action on the side, which is subject to resolution to grant plan already. It's an allocated site and so SA1 in the draft local plan, and it's identified as a proposed SINC designation, so there's not an existing SINC designation site, and it's a new SINC designation that is proposed, which directly conflicts with on-site allocation and our proposed secured resolution to grant. At the time of the assessment carried out by London Wildlife Trust, they were aware of the plans and for development at this site, and the evidence base acknowledges that. So there's a clear conflict between that designation and the site application. And the same applies to the site, which is N7 SA2. That has an existing SINC that wraps around the gas holders, and we already have planning permission that was taking place in progress of the plan, and the local plan is to extend SINC across the site and across the site that have presented the form. So it's entirely clear what the relationship really is between policy 3 and diversity. The site application designations which conflict with each other.
Do you know what the SINC references are?
Yeah. So vector of site is NEB1.
Yeah.
And is NEB2.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So again, it's the SINC designation versus results. So respond to that.
Certainly. So the evidence base is what what's on site currently. It's been designated as SINC review with the London Wildlife Trust. It's gone into the London Wildlife Cycle, and it's been scrutinised for independent assessment, and it was considered sound and best practice. So the new SINC just reflect what is on the ground currently with regards to the nature of the policy. WS3 does set out a mitigation hierarchy to minimise development impacts on SINC. I think it's important to realise that to consider as well that not all of these developments have full consent and consent can change. We're not saying that the SINC has to stay there in perpetuity. It's just mitigating that loss of nature, that nature biodiversity. So yeah, part 6 policy water space 1 deals with avoiding damage, minimising, and then delivering off-site compensation.
So if you took the example of the LBC, and is it permission or is it
It's an outline permission.
outline permission? But that is based on the development area being significant parts, being delivered on the SINC, and that's all. So accommodate that for the policy approach.
Yes, because we would like to mitigate it in terms of minimising it, but if not, it's delivering offset compensation for the state.
When you go through the mitigation hierarchy approach.
Yeah, the hierarchy, which is very accepted.
So that could be done on site, or if that could it be?
I mean, the planning permission that was granted clearly had a landscape and biodiversity strategy that was able to achieve and lead the biodiversity net gain on the site. So it was seen listed in 2023, the most recent being sort of a preferable response to the conflicting needs of the site, rather than protecting this area of road SINC, which I don't think was seen as particularly high value. But it wasn't reflected in the LD plan 2020.
But there's a process to go through that you can build on that 30% of the SINC. Sorry, you can build on that SINC to accommodate 30% of your development. But you just need to go through the mitigation hierarchy to.
I mean, I suppose it's the point that we through the outline planning permission, we'd already gone through the process. So it seems a bit counterintuitive to place the SINC back into an area that's considered deemed not of that value, and where we've actually also managed to accommodate the landscape and ecology strategy as well.
So the evidence is what the evidence is. It's prepared by ecology experts. It's been reviewed, and it's. I mean, disputing the description.
I'm not disputing that they say that it's contiguous. But I think we were expecting more justification for how how that would work in the specifics of this site, because any B16 covers enough across the greenway. Yeah. Talk about extensions generically, so there's extensions, but not specifically about the individual points. It's very difficult to know exactly what we're looking to sort of critique as well.
Anything further you want to say?
Yes. The NPPF 5.1 does talk about land being allocated for development with the least environmental immunity value. So just sort of going back to the designation as a SINC doesn't be a sound if we're creating a site for development, which according to the framework has to have also saying biodiversity value contradictory. The point I wanted to make was on the urban gasworks, we did follow the mitigation hierarchy, and we do acknowledge that it's in the policy that plan. So that is what. But in that instance, we're not actually able to deliver our biodiversity net gain on the site because we have to hold site. So it's counterintuitive to them extend on the site when we already know we can deliver but meet our bylaws to have paying on site. And
Yeah.
under part 6, it says appropriate compensation once you've gone through the mitigation hierarchy, that would be reviewed. So as drafted, I think it really is quite significant implication.
But you will provide appropriate compensation, won't you? Albeit that it'll be off-site.
Offsite, yeah.
So it's not, it's just financial contribution for the off-site and deliver the off-site PNG or whatever. Well, they'll refuse permission.
Yeah, but I think the key point is it's counterintuitive when you know that you can't deliver the purpose on site. Then
yeah, I understand the issue. But equally, I understand that if you've done a comprehensive system mapping exercise, that's the starting point, and that's where you work from. Albeit that you get these opportunities where there's, permissions have been granted or schemes are being put forward. So, okay, yeah, understand. I think through these points now, I understand the issue. But I'll have a think about it. Okay. So, any other parts of GWS 3? Well, any of the parts of GWS 3. We've talked about, in effect, the sites that have been mapped. I know some of the issues about parts 3, 4, and 7, I think.
On GW.
Yeah.
I like it. Raising.
Okay, you've dealt with the manuals. Okay, thank you. Oh, it was one actually that you did raise, and I think it's the requirement for any biodiversity net gain, if it has to be provided off-site, in a borough, is that consistent with national policy approach?
Yes, and it was Regulation 19 response. It's Regulation 19 116.02.
I mean, I suppose practically.
It's a strategic approach. Obviously, we want it on site and we want it within Newham. It's not possible within Newham. We do accept that it will have to be delivered elsewhere, but and that there is flexibility within the policy to do that.
In terms of the last part, Epping Forest, to mod press that, and this is all about the mitigation approach. And it's just the terminology.
It's the terminology. Yeah. Since we consulted, we've completed that work. To the tariff, which says people not travelling to the forest as opposed to the impacts on the forest.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily on-site provision of alternative natural green space.
No, it has to be something that would deter you from going to the forest. It has to be something that's similar. But they recognise, hopefully do recognise that a borough like Newham can't necessarily provide another forest. Yes. So we work with them really closely to ensure that we are delivering projects which will see people drawn to areas within the borough that exist and improvements, and that package of measures has resulted in a tariff.
And that's a much more effective approach to providing on-site something that actually wouldn't provide an alternative.
Correct. Because on-site green infrastructure improvements need to be effective. This is to deter people from travelling.
And it's agreed with Newham, yes. And there are opportunities there. It's effective because there are places. Okay. Anything else on GWS 3? No. GWS 4 tree cover currently 16%. GWS 4 Part 1 first 20% from 16%. I mean, yes, you see that's an aspiration. We'll seek to deliver 20% canopy cover through protecting existing trees. So prevent them being lost. Net increase, more development, and then report. So basically, all you could do, I suppose, is tree cover on application, on allegations.
Yes, as you said at the beginning of the day on this topic, we have very little green space, so connection and connectivity. Islands that mean that trees are a really good way of mitigating those impacts.
Yeah.
Tree covers impact.
20% figure, I mean, is that just a figure?
I actually work with the arboriculturist to see whether that would be good or not. Because it would be appropriate.
By new trees on development sites, you can get it up from 16 to 20. Because that's the only way it's identifying a mechanism to deliver it.
Yes, that's true. We're be thinking about street trees, but so we can do as well as the council.
Okay, right.
It is through, it doesn't think.
Yeah, I just probably there were other things because. Right, thank you. So in terms of GWS 5, play and informal recreation, again, some context. High young people in Newham, 37% of the population 25. So the national standard of 0.25 hectares per 1,000 people, well short of that. We talked about the overall shortage of accessible green space, but in terms of this standard of play in recreational space, even more of a shortfall. Is it? I mean, this is it's not 0.25 hectares per 1,000 people as you take the standard, and you're on 0.05. So it really is a big shortfall. Only 8.93 hectares for playgrounds.
But allocations do set out requirements for play space in the public realm, and we've categorised those according to the National Field Trust standard. Which again, looking at the emerging efforts, what it's asking us to do treat national standards and reflect the situation that both have within the tax, which is trying to plug these gaps. So that's what we tried to do.
Okay. Again, the opportunities, as you said, through the applications.
And on, I think it's also talked about on our existing green spaces as well.
Right, okay. So, William, I picked up a couple of points that you made. Do you want to?
I think the main comment was just that we wanted to see it perhaps more in line with the London policy, which is more explicit about place space requirements of 10 square metres of place space per child.
But this, the doesn't include this stuff. You can still refer back to that London Plan standard.
Yeah.
So I didn't really see any consistency.
Yeah.
Okay. No, okay. You were very thorough in your assessment of this big plan. Yes, okay. Right, look, what we're going to do now before we move on to the three specific sites, and we'll have a short break, and then we'll come back at, can we say, 24? We'll look at the three areas, and then we've got waste utilities, which will make full start, I suspect, at that point. Okay. Okay, it's 10 to 4, so we will do just a slight quick detour in the agenda because someone's got to leave soon. What policy W4 is I'm going to quickly deal with, and I've got very little. I'm overlooking that.
Yeah.
Yes.
I apologise. Sorry.
No, it's fine, it's fine. So yes, I know you've got to leave. So so policy W4 is utilities and digital connectivity infrastructure, and I asked some questions about that. The council responded. There isn't, there weren't any other statements or any significant representations about this policy, I don't think. So I don't really have much to ask, but there are some modifications proposed to it, both to the policy and implementation text. Yeah.
I think just to the policy itself, just 3 modifications on the policy W4 Part 1C, Part 2, and Part 6.
Yeah.
Do you want a page number?
No, I've got those, yeah.
Yeah.
But isn't there a policy and implementation text modification as well?
Not in the implementation text.
No? Okay.
Just the policy side.
Right, okay. So they would treat it as minor modifications. You're double checking.
Sorry, just to.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I think that is linked to the Bampton sewage treatment work, which is linked to like Bampton Riverside issue that the mitigation measures have to be completed ahead of the occupation.
So that is a change to the implementation.
Yeah. Sorry.
And that was one that was agreed with Thames Water, I think, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So this policy basically is similar to the adopted policy 2018.
Yes.
The digital infrastructure and connectivity in general.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You say it's proven effective. It's carried forward from the 2018 Biden development management process. Right. Okay. Well, I don't have any more questions about it. So fine. So
thank you.
Okay. Right.
Yes,
so you feel free to go and.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right, let's go back to the agenda items that we were going to move on to. So these are the changes relating to the site allocation policies. The first one was N2 SA4, which is the XL Western entrance, which we talked about under matter 4. And then there was the issue, we did discuss a number of the issues. One of the action points was about looking at the open space and the green space and the policy requirements. So the council's proposed modification and a change to the site map and the policies map. So you've had a chance to look at that. Yeah. I'll just have it over to you, I think.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. So I think I say thank you obviously for updating the policies map. We appreciate it. But I think since it's been updated in the modifications, we don't feel like it actually reflects the existing green space on the site. Particularly includes like levels of hard standing, which we would class as being green space.
It still does.
Yeah. So we obviously had the policies map that we discussed back in December, which had the green colouring all over pretty much most of the site allocation. Obviously, that's now been modified, and you've got the green square, and then to the right of that, you've got the green square.
Yeah.
But we think there should be on the right hand side green square. It basically includes existing hard standing. So you've got the trees, and then you've got the green mound. But we feel like that policies map should reflect the currently adopted Newham plan policies map, because it's got the green square and it's got the 2 triangles. Because if you go down there at the moment, it's got a set of green trees in one of the triangles, and then there's area of high standing tarmac, and that at the moment, the current proposed modifications policies map includes all that as green space, and it's just looking at the revised policy wording. It says development should address green space deficiency by re-providing and enhancing existing green space, and it goes on to say the consolidated green space should retain the existing quantity of green space. So we're happy for that to be the case, but at the moment it includes areas which is hard standing and not actually green space. So we feel like the policy map should be revised to basically show what's there at the moment in terms of the Newham local plan policy map currently.
Okay, and in terms of the site map, the indicative map, and the shape and the quantity of the green space, any comments on that?
Yeah, well, I think that as you look at the proposed modified policies map on the right hand side, we think that should be split into the two tribals similar to the existing.
Yeah, sorry, but there's also a change to the site map, the indicative site map for the allocation. You got that? Is it in the schedule? It's in the schedule. I've got it here. So
I think it is, but not within the mapping section, because it's within the site allocation, maybe. The indicative map. It's just not.
Okay.
It will be in the action point, in response to the action point, but the indicative map might not be as a post modification table.
So you got the response to AP 11. Anyway, while you're looking for that, because I've got a copy of this. I've not drawn it myself, I'm sure of that.
Make it up.
But do you want to comment on the factual definition, I suppose, of the existing green space, going back to the definition of vegetated and incidental bits of tarmac, etc.
So we recognise that the original mapping that had been done by the consultant had taken into the whole Victoria Square and the wider extent. And in the session before Christmas, we said we would look at the mapping to revise it to be accurate to the categorisation in the green water infrastructure strategy. So we've mapped the Victoria Square green space, and then you've got those two triangles, but they do speak to each other. They're not. They form part of a square. So the tarmac area is like a path that runs through the green space. So we thought that forms like a continuous sort of green square space, albeit there's a wide path that runs through it. If we were to disassociate them, it would fragment that space. And again, the policy direction is looking for a consolidated space. And it's a small open space, and that's aligned with the strategy to the London plan, which is 0.4 to 2 hectares. At the moment, the existing functional space, as we propose it to be back, is 0.61 hectares. And the difference would be 0.48 hectares if we were to do it the other way. I mean, we would hope that the policy is about enhancing that space and improving it. If you are just to do 0.48, you really are doing the very minimum in terms of provision. And we do just feel that that square is a contiguous green space with the path running through it. But we did recognise the mapping originally was overly onerous. So yeah, that's the approach we're taking. Yeah, I suppose we feel it's an intentionally designed green space. It's a coherent spatial unit.
In terms of, and going back to the fact that a different designation was only adopted in 2018. Well, there was a slightly different methodology used then. Is that so? You've looked at all this using a different approach, and so some of those, quite from your point of view, legitimately changed. You can't just freeze that and say we'll just carry that forward.
No, that's right.
Okay. Did you find the?
Sorry, what was the number?
BD 017A.
Thank you.
That'll be in response to action. Yes. Page 12.
Well, so the question is the shape and the size of the indicative area of proposed green space, as referred to in the policy, has changed from what it was in the submitted plan. but it's still at least as large as what is shown as existing green space, I would estimate, on the 2 squares that you're saying are too large anyway. So your comment on that is, I guess it follows through that you say that the size of this is too large as an indicative area.
Yeah, I think so. We're basically just trying to demonstrate that it should reflect the actual existing green spaces on site, which we don't think it does currently in the revised qualifications site allocation map. I think we did something that the consistency with the existing policies map, basically identifying the 3 green spaces as they are.
And the consequence of that would be if you're providing the same amount, it would be smaller than the blob that's shown here.
Yeah,
that's the logical through. And in terms of this blob here and the planning for the site, is your concern that it takes up too much of the space? Is that essentially?
Yeah. So essentially, we think there should be a proportionate amount of green space. So we're very much willing to provide what is there at the moment and enhance it. But I think providing more than that, it's just a conflict with the policy map and what is there at the moment.
Okay, right. In terms of what you were saying about just to run that about just the justification for the minimum size of the consolidated area.
Yeah, so we aligned it to a small open space, which in London Plan Table 8.1 is 0.4 to 2 hectares. So if it was mapped at the minimum, disassociating the 2 triangles that form part of the square, you would have a 0.48, which would be a 0.8 hectare improvement on the site. But given that small open space is 0.4 to 2 hectares, and given the lack of open space within Newham, we would hope that the site allocation would be more aspirational.
The area that is shown in the indicative blob is what, 0.6?
No, I don't know the indicative blob.
Okay.
But the 0.61 hectares is what is mapped currently. And it would be 0.48 on the policies map.
So the 0.61 is what is existing. Did you say the 0.61 is the 2 squares mapped as you?
As we've mapped it, it's 0.61 hectares. As mapped in the adopted proposals map, policies map rather, is 0.48 hectares. The indicative map is indicative, and it's showing the location of where we would like to see that consolidated green space coming forward. Bearing in mind, we use the London Plan standards for the space, so it's small open space, so that can be anything between 0.4 and 2 hectares. So there is a bandwidth there. Okay,
understood. So, right, I've got it. Understood the point, so leave it with me.
Yeah, I think just final point is, I think you're saying it's 0.42. As green space on the adopted policies map, it's 0.61 with the green blob on the proposed modification. So that's it.
0.48 is
the adopted
position.
And it's
0.61.
Okay, so I guess that kind of conflicts with the policy wording, because it's saying development should address green space deficiency by re-providing and enhancing existing green space. And it says space consolidated green space should retain the existing quantity of green space. But on that, it would be you'd be providing more than the existing green space. If that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
So understood. Okay. Yeah.
I think it meant existing quantity as in going no lower than that, rather than just bare minimum providing the existing space, because the London Plan, the MPF is like increasing functionality enhancement, and we've got the small space designation there, which is 0.4, as I said, to 2 hectares. So we would hope it would be aspirational for the site rather than just re-providing the existing space.
Yeah, I think we provide existing. Yeah, we provide what's there, but also enhance it and enhance the functionality to the moment. Bring down, which isn't that functional for people to use, etc. And you've got obviously the trees there, which not people can use. So yeah,
I don't think we disagree on that point. It's just that we feel that square is a space in and of itself. It just has the path running through it, and that's where it's reflected.
Okay, thank you. Right, moving on to the next one. Was Rick Roberts Way. It's one of the LBC, wasn't it?
Yes.
So there was a modification proposed here. This is the wording of the policy. Yes, to the wording of policy SA7.
Yeah.
So there's not a map that's changing here. This is just the word. So, yeah, any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we do really appreciate the removal of the requirement to protect and enhance existing sports and recreation uses. We do know, however, that there is the change in the 1.2 hectare of open space to green space, which we appreciate has been done across the board and across multiple site allocations to address deficiency in green infrastructure. What we are still slightly confused about, which we did discuss at the site allocations hearing, is that the wording does say that there should be a provision of play space and Muga in addition to the 1.2 hectares of open space. And noting that the 1.2 hectare figure does come from the LCS permission, that does specifically say 1.2 hectares of publicly accessible open space, which would technically include Muga and play space and the like. And this is also reflected in the draft infrastructure delivery plan. The document reference is EB004 on page 123, which does note this requirement from the LCS 1.2 hectares, but does also say should include play space and playable public realm. So that is essentially where we still feel slightly in conflict. And also that's also in light of the specific definition of green space. We're not in disagreement of the site being green, because that is our intention, given that it is adjacent. So we do want to enhance that and we do want to bring that into character. We are just concerned about the Muga and play space being over and above the 1.2 hectare requirement, which is also over and above the LCS permission.
Just to be clear, so it's the locally equipped area for play and the local area. That's the bit that seems to be additional to the 1.2.
Yeah.
Because the multi-use games area would be on the 1.2 hectares.
Yes.
So that's fine.
Okay.
That's
also our question.
That's what it seems to be as modified.
Yeah.
It seems to clearly locate the multi-use games area on the publicly owned land. Is that what the intention is? Yeah.
Yeah. But in addition to 1.2 hectares, what we're trying to understand.
Well, I don't think the multi-use games area would be additional, would it? Or would it? The way it's written. I don't know. Yeah, okay, fair point, yeah. Okay, I read it to be, that would be on the...
This would be LCS, that's both Muga and the play space is meant to be included within one form. Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
So I suppose, where would these play areas and the Muga go if they weren't on the green space?
So the play can be on the green space, but the Muga would be in addition.
Yeah.
I think. That would.
Well, it says the Muga is on the publicly owned land, and earlier on it says the 1.2 hectares is on the publicly owned land.
Yeah, so it must be, as worded, it must be on that space.
It's in that part of the site, but I think whether the intention is that they're separate or not, but it's within the middle part, like the parcel of the site. So on the publicly owned lands, we see there's like three. So the LLDC and the obviously, the European part. But I think, we can take away whether it's a separate. I think it obviously be informed by our evidence, whether they're in separate requirements or whether we can combine them. Because typically where we have the hectares of green space and then a Muga, they are separate asks typically. But so in this instance,
So in terms of the indicative site map with the green area in the sort of, that's the 1.2 hectares, is it?
Yeah, indicatively. Yeah,
indicatively. Yeah.
So then that's why we're asking. So on top of that, within that publicly owned land, then there would also be a Muga, is what we're trying to understand.
Yeah, whether it's within
part of the LCS, and given that the target is coming from, that permission did originally intend for all of that to be included because it's publicly accessible open space.
Noted. Yeah. No, I think, I understand where you're coming from. I think typically how we do it normally is obviously we're informed by the evidence, and those asks could be separate, they could be the same. But in this instance, I think, with the LCS, it could come forward within the one space. But could we clarify that point? And then,
Thank you. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Thank you. I think we've understood. Yeah. It's funny, we read it and you think it means one thing, and then someone else points out it means something else.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, so that deals with that one. You're very welcome to stay, but if you wish to depart at this point, you're welcome.
Well done, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So that brings us on to the action point 18, which related to the allocation at the N13 SA3 former East Ham Gasworks. So, as you know, we had a discussion about that, and I listened to that. And it seemed to me that where it led to was the fact that the development, that the effect of the mall and the lack of tall building zone, and the constraints and the costs, etc., would lead to a policy approach that in effect would not deliver a viable development. That's basically what it seemed to be. So something had to change in terms of three-dimensional strategy of going up or out further. So that was what I left the council and St William Homes to have a look at in consultation with GLA as well, because it could potentially affect the mall. You know, I said if necessary, change to the mall boundary when that's and that's in the that was in the context of the London Plan Policy G3 Part C, which talks about any changes to mall boundaries or release of mall should be in consultation with the GLA. So thank you for engaging with it. So a note, we've got a clear plan that now shows what the council and St William, I think, have agreed, with some additional areas. There were some very little detailed points that we talked about last time about bits of hard standing, maybe mapping errors. So that was picked up and tidied up in this. But the substantive area that would be different and released from mall would be an area to the south of the gas holder structure that would be an additional roughly 1.8 hectares, something like that. And that figure may include all the other little bits, but that's the essence of it, isn't it? So that's where we're at. So can I just clarify what the figures were, just in case I ever leave them? So the submitted plan removed some land from the mall. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Was that 1.4 hectares or 1.5? I've got two figures noted down. There was bits of different parcels, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, sorry. No, the original gasworks was a reorganisation. So there was no actual loss on that parcel in terms of area 21, but there was a loss of Alfred's Way open space part. So that was a loss of 1.89.
In this allocation?
No, not in this allocation. So in this allocation, the original allocation with the reorganisation of the boundary, there wasn't actually deletion. The deletion has come through from the work that we've done subsequently. Okay,
so the submitted plan didn't release any land from the mall. Well, it
reorganised this space.
But not any net loss.
No, there was no net loss. The DLA hadn't.
Okay, that's so. So now what is removed? The amount of mole that would be removed by this modification would be around 1.8 hectares. Is that right? That's your understanding as well. You've not measured it, but that's
yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Okay. Yes, I'm rounding that, but yeah. Okay. So fine. So that brings us into how can you justify releasing land from the metropolitan land? And the London Plan Policy tells us that there have to be exceptional circumstances, and that's assessed against the purposes of including land in mole, which are set out. The council and St William have looked at those, and two of them are not relevant, are they? Two of the purposes set out in G3B, yeah. Mm-hmm. So purposes 2 and 3 are not relevant. Now, so it brings in purposes B1 and 4. They're the ones that they're the purposes that the metropolitan land serves. Yeah, we're talking about the substantive area. Okay, let me just get back to that page. You must know what page it is.
I use the online version.
No, I know. Yes. Okay, I can click on it. And I know that you did when we talked before, you were talking about your analysis of the metropolitan open land purposes, but you've come to an agreement here about this. So the purposes here are about contributing to the physical structure of London by being clearly distinguished from the built-up area. And then part 4 is it forms part of a strategic corridor, node, or a link in the network of green infrastructure and meets one of the above criteria. So parts 1 and 4, it does perform some of those functions.
Yes, we aren't disputing that it functions as model. We just set out the exceptional circumstances for its release.
So, and that's a balancing exercise.
Yes.
That considers those purposes, but it's still a balance. It's not just the GLA can explain. But so you set out what those circumstances are, which are that what does the housing need, and the fact that it's a site allocation is suitable and proposed for development. And it's not possible without some release of law. There's the benefits not only of providing homes, but of the remediation, the provision of public accessible open space, green space, and reinstatement in particular sporting facilities. And in the context of the shortfall in Newham of the facilities, etc. And the relative lack of harm to the remaining purposes of the mole parcel.
There is still a corridor, a green space corridor, albeit we appreciate that the parcel, the substantive part to the south has gone. There is still that green link. There's another parcel of mole to the south as well.
Yeah. Okay. In terms of, I'll get other comments in a minute. So that's essentially you set out the exceptional circumstances, and what you haven't done is set out any modification to the plan on the boundary to the mole.
And not at this point. We have.
Is that because you wanted to deal with this first?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what we yeah.
Because if this were done, there would be knock-on effects not only for the site map, but for some of the policy requirements, design principles, and those sort of things. Yeah. Okay. But that comes if this is agreed.
Yes.
Okay. Right, understood. So anything else you want to say about the exceptional circumstances that it's there in writing?
No, we've said that in the paper.
Yeah. So William, anything you want to highlight? Otherwise, I'll just get the GLA's view. And
no, I mean, I think probably all is on the same ground.
Yeah.
So thank you. So if I may, depending on what the GLA say, I may.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But in terms of your assessment of the viability of a scheme, leaving aside what the policy design and development principles are, etc., do you think this would provide sufficient space for a viable scheme to be accommodated on the site?
Yes, and I think on that point there, we've submitted quite significant comments generally on behalf of William about viability.
Yeah.
And viability is obviously a series of gasworks sites in the borough. So given the abnormal costs are excluded, the viability to deliver affordable housing is marginal. So all of that is set out in the various hearing statements, and 180 homes on this site isn't going to deliver the funds to open up the site. And I think the fundamental point on all of this, which comes back to the green space policies, is opening up the site for public access, and that is a part of the MOL purposes. So that to achieve that policy objective, one needs to create development too.
Yeah.
It probably the only slight nuance between us and the local authority, we are in agreement. Obviously, the local authority have concluded that the site still serves the purposes of MOL. It does that by putting one scoring point on that purpose, B1, which is the kind of the physical structure.
Yeah.
We have raised concerns about the assessment of that under that because of various aspects and what we class as double counting with number 4, but we kind of put that aside because in any event we have set out in our hearing statement a list of very detailed exceptional circumstances, some of which have now reappeared with the local authorities. We've got common ground on that, and ultimately we have concluded between ourselves that we are in agreement on that proposed boundary modification. We have that has been in consultation with the mayoral team. without predicting what might be said, it doesn't require agreement of the mayoral team. And it is probably worth actually just saying, because you may not be aware of this, that we had a pre-application meeting with development control officers of the council on the 16th of January. And whilst we haven't got the written comments back yet, the verbal comments at that meeting was that the development control officers recognised that whether they were exceptional circumstances or not from a development control process, they considered that they would constitute very special circumstances to support development if an application came forward. And the reason that we had that conversation is obviously this forms one small component of the plan as a whole. And if there are any delays to the adoption of the plan through viability or whatever it might be, we may be submitting a planning application where this component has not been formally adopted. If that makes sense. Your report will come out. So we asked them to opine on that part because we might be submitting an application where the boundary changes haven't yet come through.
So that consultation with the development management team,
the GLA is the
GLA development.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So we haven't got that written feedback yet, but again, from that point of view, there was some alignment. So that's the most up-to-date situation, and we're preparing a planning application for submission shortly. Okay. In terms of what the viability and what this would then deliver if this site was the developable area is extended by this molar release. Yes.
The position in the submitted plan, I think the assumption was it would be around 200 or your assessment would be more likely difficult to achieve on that area. But with this additional area, are we up to I think
these are 600 things.
So that would be the total.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's back to what you were saying about the but that then starts hitting the viability threshold from your point of view.
Yes, and the broad assumptions taken from all the other gas-fired sites, and obviously some really fortunate enough to have a wide portfolio, is that then can fund, that starts the development rather than leaving the site fenced off as it is at the moment. So that's the do-nothing scenario.
Yeah.
And it funds the policy requirements to remediate the site, open up the site, reprovide the cricket pitch, improve biodiversity, etc., as well as deliver a larger number of homes.
That feeds into the exceptional circumstances that the council have referred to and summarised technical ground and whatever.
Yes, and I would say, sir, that it does also then facilitate Part B2 of the purposes, because it would include open air facilities, especially for leisure, recreation, sport, etc. Now, they are going to serve a significant part of London because they'll be East London. So the re-provision of the cricket facilities, we would say, by amending the boundary, you get enhancement of the purposes of MOL because Part 2 then comes into fruition, whereas at the moment it doesn't exist.
Understood. Okay, thank you. Right, the GLA. Sorry, there was a. Okay,
No,
tell us your position. Yeah.
it's useful, thank you, because I think, as the council's pointed out, the plan as submitted didn't include any kind of notable MOL release that we could have commented on. So I appreciate you bringing us in before kind of consulting on making modification.
Yeah.
So that said, obviously we've had to look at this. I'm not sure, has the statement of common ground between the council and the landowner been signed? So it has been signed, sorry. So I haven't actually seen the statement of common ground. But fundamentally, where we're starting from is obviously the purposes of MOL itself. And as the council has stated, the evidence is there that this parcel, as it is, meets the first purpose of MOL. And then by association, part 4 is relevant as well. So the physical structure of London. And looking at the evidence base for that, I'd say we acknowledge that the kind of proposed, let's call it rationalization of the MOL boundary that was proposed as part of the submission plan
was to actually help the MOL better meet that first purpose.
Yeah.
So that's our starting point, that there is an MOL designation. MOL is afforded the same status as Greenbelt. Any change, it is a kind of MOL in the current local plan, so any proposed changes, exceptional circumstances, when this is fully evidenced and justified, and also taking into account the purposes from the plan and the MOL. So fundamentally, the GLA's position is and has always been in the London plan that residential development is inappropriate development in MOL. So housing targets, the strategic approach in the London plan is predicated on don't put housing in MOL. Obviously, we've had extensive conversations with Newham about their housing targets and reached a position on that. Fundamentally, this site isn't in the 5-year supply. It's a longer term aspiration. That's not in disagreement by the landowner, as far as I'm aware. That's what their hearing statements talk about the expected phasing. And through our conversations with Newham about housing needs, how we kind of brought together the 5-year supply with current London plan targets up to 2029, looking at MOL for housing wasn't on the table because fundamentally it's an appropriate development. So when I'm looking at the exceptional circumstances paper, housing need isn't an exceptional circumstance in that scenario. Secondly, looking at the evidence base, because as I said, we haven't been involved in this. As I understand, no additional evidence other than the exceptional circumstances paper has been published by the council to justify the change of the lease. I understand that hearing statements are being relied on. I have reviewed these. I have noted that there is reference to other gas holder sites about the level of cost potentially. There isn't site-specific information about that. So obviously the London plan acknowledges already that gas holder sites, and I think the current site allocation is the white land, it's not within the MOL, do have levels of contamination. That is why there's a lower threshold in the London plan viability approach to affordable housing for gas holder sites. So in a way, that kind of difficulty in bringing those sites forward has already been accounted for in the London plan, and obviously the GLA's position on the affordable housing thresholds in Newham's local plan is that they should align with the London plan. Fundamentally, in terms of, there's no disagreement. I don't think anyone in the room would disagree that a former gas holder site is likely to be contaminated, is likely to require remediation. There's nothing in front of us to kind of quantify that in a sense. And then similarly, looking at the council's evidence around their plain pitch strategy, the open space strategy. Again, the question when we're looking at MOL revision, the purposes of MOL, is the use appropriate within MOL? So yes, of course, public accessibility, target cricket pitch, in principle, great within MOL. But if what I believe the council is saying and has agreed with the landowner that to deliver that objective requires a significant amount of MOL to be released that meets MOL purposes to allow residential development to deliver those public benefits, the cricket pitch, the publicly accessible open space. Can that cricket pitch or can those facilities only go in that location? So the plain pitch strategy does acknowledge that there is an existing cricket pitch on the site. It's been disused, I think, for 20 years. And the plain pitch strategy is inconclusive about the need for that pitch in that location. It is referenced as an option that should be considered to increase cricket provision in the borough. But fundamentally, it's not been tested if that is deliverable in another area. Similarly, in terms of kind of the public open space, sorry, I'm calling it public open space, opening the site up for public access, the site allocation is submitted, does seek to achieve that. It doesn't quantify a specific, is it a local park, is it a specific deficiency that we're addressing? So I know there was a lot of conversations earlier in the hearing session about Newham's levels of open space provision. We acknowledge and I've discussed with the council that those are quite low when considered against the London average. But fundamentally, in this location, the direct link to kind of improving a local open space deficiency, for example, and then what is reasonably secured through the site allocation. So it's a very long way of saying that's kind of what we've looked at. And in the absence of, I'll go back to what we're looking for in terms of when boroughs are taking forward potential modifications, it's fully evidenced and justified. So I appreciate that the landowner has, over numerous stages of consultation, I think, put in a significant amount of information. From the GLA's point of view, nothing substantive has changed since the plan was submitted. And I think that's kind of the disagreement. And I'd also caution that this is a local plan examination, so obviously I'm aware of pre-application discussions with colleagues in other teams, but fundamentally, a pre-application discussion has no bearing on what we're considering here today. So I think it's any applicant, any situation is very much entitled to come in for a pre-application discussion. And we'll look for very special circumstances, and any good DM officer will say in return, yes, I think you could make a case. That's a separate process from this. I would say we're not suggesting that the concerns that were raised at the hearing session about the reasonable prospect of this site being viable at some point in the plan period. I'm not disregarding those concerns, full stop. But what I am questioning is this amount of MOL, a loss of 20% of MOL, when there hasn't been an assessment of the impact of the amount of that lost on the original function or purpose of why that site is MOL in the first place, is that the right balance? So it seems to have been, it's either as submitted or as the landowner has proposed. I would be very happy to say we'll always consider further evidence as part of the EIP process if we need to look at this or if it's published alongside make modifications. But I think my takeaway from kind of the sessions that I've been at is that there's a range of possibilities for this site. And in taking the view, the GLA would also have to consider, I'm aware the landowner is also considers that the site should have greater height on it. There's that balance to be considered as well in terms of the strategic position of the London plan is obviously optimizing capacities on brownfield sites, particularly for housing in appropriate locations. The strategic position in the London plan is also very clear that housing is inappropriate in MOL, and boroughs should not be looking to MOL or Greenbelt to meet any of their development needs unless there are no other alternatives. So hopefully that's a kind of canter through. So I did start to try and put it in a letter, but it got quite long, so I thought I'd just say.
No, I understand. I mean, okay. I suppose, obviously, exceptional circumstances is a conclusion that you reach at the end of putting everything into the balance. So that's what I suppose ultimately I'll need to decide. In terms of actually the sort of process, the London Plan policy is the definitive sort of definition of what the process is, yeah? So that is that any release of MOL should be through a local plan process. So that does include through examination. I guess you would dispute that.
No, I wasn't disputing.
No, I'm not saying you were disputing. I'm just making sure I'm going through this. And then it's in consultation with the mayor. Well, that's in the circumstances where we're at. That's done, I suppose. And adjoining boroughs. Well, whether this affects adjoining boroughs, I suppose. Yeah, does it?
I think we would seek to reach out to Barking and Dagenham, we hadn't done yet, so we wanted to have the hearing today.
That could be ticked
Would
off.
be part of the process.
Yeah, okay, fine. And then we get to the exceptional circumstances test, which is balancing of all the sort of the benefits and not. And so the council and St William have clearly set them out in summary form what they are. And you've gone through very clearly, and I've noted what the, kind of a different perspective on all that is. So understood. And then it's fully evidenced and justified, which is the point about, well, you not satisfied that, I suppose, what St William are saying. So sorry, let me just pick up on one thing. You referred to my test, I suppose, of whether there's a reasonable prospect of the site being viable in the planned period.
Yes.
So I suppose I reached the conclusion that there didn't seem to be a reasonable prospect.
Yeah.
What you're saying is you don't think that's fully evidenced to reach that conclusion.
So I think I'm not disagreeing that there's some uncertainty around this site. What I'm questioning is, I think, because I was sat in the back of one of the hearing sessions, you raised the view that there's different options for how the site could be changed, the site allocation could be changed to make you satisfied that there was a reasonable prospect. So I think my point was really about, yes, probably there is, but looking at alterations to MOL, I'm looking at the kind of exceptional evidence circumstances fully evidenced and justified, and there are a range of options, I would say, between the council's current site allocation, the landowner's proposed changes through the hearing statement, and I think my question would be, is obviously, it's not really the GLA's job to take a view on exceptional circumstances in the majority of cases. That does sit with you, but because we were asked to look at this, I've looked at kind of the information that has been provided. I'm also aware there are concerns around the whole plan viability assessment. Again, not disagreeing that the site would be subject to abnormal costs, but if the evidence within this, for example, the capacity, I think there's different capacity figures in the hearing statements. I think one references 600, the one that talks about phasing is 700. So the question would be, is if we're releasing a fifth of the MOL, is it certain that that's what is needed? And if that is the question, then to release it to deliver these other benefits, is that justified in this location? So as I said, it's just that balancing part. So it's no disagreement whatsoever that, a view needs to be taken on a developable site allocation, and if alterations are needed. It's just what I've been able to look at was only the plan is submitted versus two different options. So that's my question about. I appreciate you probably don't want additional evidence, but I think in terms of consultation with the GLA, I've understood that. So I've said on the evidence available, there are other options that could be considered. I think because fundamentally as well, the gas holders say, as submitted, it is on the white land and it was delivering benefits within the MOL. So obviously I'm not suggesting that we don't want improvements, but an option is not delivering the cricket pitch of the MOL. So I think that's just the question, is that's unfortunately at the strategic level, that's the level of balancing that we're looking at, is making that.
Yeah, okay. In terms of what obviously this allows exceptional circumstances to release more. And I understand the point you're making that the London Plan targets are not predicated on releasing more or green balance. Understood.
Yeah.
But things have moved on, haven't they? I mean, the targets in this plan that have been renegotiated and you've absolutely agreed with in terms of trying to meet the London Plan targets as soon as possible have been reflected in the plan, and then optimising capacity thereafter. You're supportive of all that because Newham has an important role to deliver homes in London. Yeah. So, no.
Well, I think I'm always cautious about, because one of the things we always have to consider around conformity is we're considering conformity with the plan as adopted. there isn't a draft London plan that's over consultation. So there's
Oh,
nothing-
yeah.
So I think fundamentally, you know, I'll give you a different example just to be clear that the GLA isn't just it says no, you can't release it. Hounslow's local plan is going through examination. They're proposing some greenbelt release for industrial land linked to Heathrow.
Yeah.
So obviously there's a very clear case about this type of development is needed. It needs to be in this location to go with this.
Yeah.
In this case, my point about housing was fundamentally that although there is obviously looking to increase housing supply from all sources, that doesn't extend into looking at MOL for Newham or Greenbelt. That is consistent also with how we respond to all our local plans across the kingdom. So,
but that's not actually what the London Plan Policy whatever it is, G3 says, is it? It doesn't rule out.
No, it doesn't rule it out.
So the fact that you may have adopted that approach, that's fine. Yes,
Yeah.
but that's not. There's nothing in here or anywhere in the London Plan that says you can't take meeting housing needs or boosting housing supply to be a relevant factor in exceptional circumstances test.
So I think what I'm trying to clarify, and this would be consistent when the GLA is looking at applications as well, the London Plan is predicated on meeting London's development needs within brownfield sites within that area. Housing, and because our policy is linked to MPPF policy, housing is an appropriate development. So yes, of course, it doesn't stop that, but when you're looking at alterations to boundaries of MOL, and when you're consulting with the GLA, we do take a view on whether or not, so obviously we do say exceptional circumstances would need to be demonstrated, but fundamentally, the strategic approach of the London Plan is that you meet your development needs outside MOL and Greenbelt. So I'm not disagreeing that you can use it, but I think I wanted to be clear that in this case, because we have a statement of common ground around their housing targets, and because we're satisfied with that, so I'm just being clear, I think, that the GLA's position has been consistent on that point.
But that statement of common ground and those housing figures assume contribution from this site, albeit not in the 5-year supply.
Yes, and I think that's the difference I want to make, and that's the point, is that beyond 2029, again, the London Plan sets out an approach for boroughs about how they should meet their need. We've looked at Newham's housing supply sources in that. So post 2029, boroughs need to look to various sources to set their own housing target. Our statement of common reflects that we were happy with the approach in that, and again, it wasn't reliant on MOL. So I'm just trying to be explicit that at no point in our conversations around housing with Newham was the need for MOL release ever discussed.
No,
any kind of housing targets, or for us to be satisfied. So I think the language is boosting significantly the supply of homes. We consider that Newham had achieved that through their brownfield land supply.
So if this site was removed, if the alternative modification to this, for me, is to say, right, this allocation, it's just, there's no reasonable prospect, therefore modify the plan to remove it. Well, maybe that's still unfair, but would that be something that you wouldn't object to because it wouldn't hit the housing numbers
I will
significantly?
get my response to that. This is not to be treated as informing a DM approach, but in principle, yes, because that would be a decision you would be taking and it would affect. And there are several EIPs where inspectors have directed removal of sites. We do look at those fundamentally if it doesn't overall negatively or detrimentally impact the borough's ability to meet their housing targets, their employment needs. So I'm just saying across the board.
Yeah.
You know, obviously I'd say we'd be disappointed as there is a preference for these sites to come forward, former utility sites for housing. So of course, we would like to see that site, but if what I'm saying is to oversimplify it, the trade-off is loss of 20% of MOL. That's in my mind.
Versus a loss of 260 homes, which was assumed in the capacity.
You said, and I would be kind of going back. My answer would probably be different if this was a much bigger site.
Yeah. Even though the impact on Mull would be bigger. Yeah. Okay, understood. Okay. What about the national policy test for exceptional circumstances for greenbelt limits? Because that's all about, if you can't meet your development needs, that's a significant, factor in determining. In fact, it is the driving factor in determining whether there's exceptional circumstances. So, does that not come in? That's completely contrary to what you're saying about the London plan being predicated on not having to release, and therefore it's almost.
No, I think we're saying the same thing, is that the London plan as adopted sets housing targets. The boroughs need to meet those housing targets. We set aspirations for employment land, industrial land. We look at boroughs' local plans to see if they're meeting those needs. So from a London plan perspective, our statement of Newham housing and supply confirms that they are meeting their housing requirements. So I agree with you about what the MPPF says. You absolutely, if you're not meeting your development needs, then you do need to look at these areas. So my understanding of the development needs that this MOL release would support is a cricket pitch and additional publicly accessible open space. I think that's correct, unless I've misunderstood kind of the landowner's concerns with it, but I think I've understood correctly that the concern is that the site allocation expects delivery of certain things within the MOL, and the amount of residential use outside the MOL is not enough to deliver those uses. So when I'm looking at the kind of needs, that's kind of the lens I've looked at it through. The objectives of the site allocation around publicly accessible open space and sports facilities.
Okay.
I'm not trying to disagree with the MPPF at all, just to be clear. It's just about what would be delivered by the site allocation with the MOL being
Okay, thank you. That's okay, clear enough. So William, and then I'll come back to the council.
Thank you. So, I mean, just a couple of points of clarification, and I can totally appreciate that there is a degree of interpretation. I think in these local plan processes, as you said earlier, so it's totally is your job to form a judgment and opine on these specific issues, and not everything can be laid out as per a planning application for the local hearing process. But as you have heard, we have provided quite significant evidence in our hearing statements and Reg 18 and 19 submissions, as well as the council's own whole plan viability evidence upon which the plan is reliant on, and that shows that there are significant delivery issues. I think also part of that, it is worth remembering that as part of our submission, we have submitted that this is a previously developed site, so it's a former gasworks site, it's not virgin green land, and there are obviously easements, pipe work, etc., crisscrossing the whole site. So I think, fully appreciate where the GLA team are coming from a strategic level, but we've obviously gone into significant detail. And if one visits the site, there is one can make judgments about whether or not the parcel of land that we are identifying actually does contribute to the physical open structure of London, where we've suggested that it doesn't, depending between 15-story gas ometer that's been there for 100 plus years. I think it's also worth reminding ourselves para 1.14 of our hearing statement, and I'm going to read this to you because it doesn't quite correlate with what the GLA is saying at the moment. So the Mayor of London's towards a new London plan, May 2025, which is the only consultation document that we've had. Obviously the London plan is out of date next month, 5 years. I know you're obviously fundamentally part of that document, but it is March 2026. But the new consultation document says that some areas of MOL are not, and I'm quoting, are not accessible to the wider public and have limited biodiversity value. this undermines the purpose of the designation. These areas could be assessed to understand whether they should be released from MOL. They may be able to help meet London's housing and accessible open space provision. For example, opening up strategic new open space accessible to Londoners alongside new homes.
Sorry, what was that quoting from?
Sorry, could I just clarify?
Yeah.
I think it's important because it sounds very good when we read it out loud. That's the Towards a New London Plan consultation document.
Yeah.
It's a high-level direction of travel document. It has no formal status in terms of impacting on policies in the current London plan, and it is very clear in the introduction to the document that the mayor is putting a range of options on the table. Not all can or will be taken forward. So I just think it sounds very certain when you read it like that, but I wouldn't want to lead you astray that it has any kind of bearing on our response to local plan because of those.
Yeah, I mean, it's only the Mayor of London's consultation document towards the New London Plan, the only document that we've got available to us. It's not our wording, it's the GLA's wording. So whether or not that's carried through, it's the only wording that we've currently got in terms of one possible direction that MOL may take. It might not, we don't know, but it does identify that one obviously can look at MOL in a positive manner, and it certainly doesn't correlate to a moratorium, but the opposite policy that we do have, as you've identified, so it is quite simple and binary. Boundaries can change in exceptional circumstances in consultation with the mayor. Yeah. And as we said, we've gone through the process. The local authority have concluded, as we have, there are exceptional circumstances. We've completed a statement on ground. There is housing emergency, and there's a judgment that you will make with that evidence in front of you. And we have suggested that housing would come forward certainly by 2030, so it would help inform the 5-year housing delivery figure. There would be an optimisation of housing numbers, which can only be good for London. And as we know, that the 2021 London Plan isn't meeting the 66,000 homes that were considered in 2017 from the SHMAR, and obviously that's about to go up to 88,000. So where you have a landowner with a proven track record of bringing forward former gasworks sites in the borough, having submitted evidence about the viability of those other gasworks sites to this examination in public, alongside a series of exceptional circumstances, including the previously developed nature of the site, contamination of the site, the UXO, all those other aspects, and has identified the possibility of enhancing the MOL by opening it up and providing for the purpose part B2, which is an added benefit. We wouldn't like you, if we could respectfully suggest, sir, to come to the conclusion that deallocation of a site is the right outcome for the current position that we're in.
No, I would fully expect you to say that. But it was, it was a question to GLO, and thank you for very honestly answering it. So,
and just to confirm, we're not here today because we would not like to see the site deallocated either. I think what we're here today is to say, clarify the GLA's position on MOL, what its purposes and functions are. The council has assessed it. It is meeting the purposes of MOL. The council, I'm not disagreeing with any of the benefits that on paper may be brought forward if that MOL were released. But the question is, the London Plan does look at working with partners to increase public access to MOL. Again, it's only in the supporting text, but that is very clear that that's through appropriate uses in MOL. Housing is not one of them. In terms of kind of the sub-regional or regional or even national importance, international importance of some MOL land, I go back to the council's evidence base about the pitch strategy. and kind of it's a local need, potentially a need with Redbridge about cricket pitches. So again, it's just not to disagree that the supply of new housing is very important, or that at some point as part of the next London plan, we will undoubtedly be looking at all that. That's not the question. But for the purposes of the current London plan, the site application is, I've only got as submitted a fifth of MOL.
In terms of what you say about the playing cricket strategy, it's specific about the cricket element.
Yes.
But isn't the more fundamental point that Newham is substantially deficient in publicly accessible open space? And this isn't publicly accessible, and there's no reasonable prospect to be being made publicly accessible.
Yeah.
So surely that is a benefit that has to be weighed in the balance. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would absolutely.
And that's evidence.
I would say,
yeah.
I would also want to look at the types of open space. We had some discussions earlier about is it a local park, is it that sort of thing? Well,
that's detail, that's not.
But in terms of a site allocation, and there's a full range of publicly accessible, what are the benefits being delivered for public accessibility? So again, it's just, it comes back to balancing, and you did ask about if any proposals would be changed to the detail of the site allocations.
And that would follow.
I would naturally expect that if these benefits are to be achieved, it would have to be very clear in the site allocation that they would be delivered.
I mean, I've not looked at it again. I mean, already the allocation includes a large area that would be greened and made publicly accessible, so it would make a significant contribution to the big shortfall that Newham has. On the face.
If it's in the right location. Because obviously there's a borough level open space deficiency, but fundamentally there's different levels of open space.
Yes.
And also MOL has other purposes, for example, flood storage. I think the site is in flood zone 3, if I made that up. So I think it's, again, when we're looking at MOL, it's different than other open space.
In terms of the alternative of going higher, isn't that ultimately the Newham to make a judgment to balance that?
Yeah, no, I would say so. So I'm just here today on the strategic balancing.
Yeah, but
I think
I left it open because there's two options really to go up or to go out.
Yeah.
And I suppose you're saying, well, going out, it's your interests. But I suppose what I'm saying, the alternative is it's quite rightly in Newham's domain, isn't it, as a priority?
From a strategic London plan perspective, there isn't an exceptional circumstances test when looking at building heights and when we look at strategic alignment with the London plan in terms of building heights. So that's why I raised that point, is that I'm thinking of the policies in the plan as a whole and fundamentally where the right balance is. So saying I appreciate it's a little bit difficult because, as I said, it is for Newham, it's their evidence. They have appropriate heights, they've made a decision.
Yeah, about locations and heights.
In consultation with us, I would be remiss if I didn't say, well, fundamentally, MOL is possibly the most highly protected land in London, Greenbelt MOL, I think. So that's kind of where our comments are coming from.
Right, okay, thank you. In terms of fully justified evidence, you sort of questioned whether reaching a judgment that the viability issues for the limited amount of space that the development could take with all the constraints there. What more would you want? I mean, would you want Sir William to provide a site-specific viability assessment? I mean,
so this is a question of, because I think the site is included in the whole plan viability.
It is. Yeah.
I think, if from memory, it says it would kind of become viable at 15%, but no abnormal costs of finished. Are you hearing me correct? So 15% affordable housing, say.
But Sir William said, well, that he didn't have to factor in all the abnormal.
Yes, exactly. So I think, obviously, I'm very cautious about saying anything site specific because fundamentally a local plan viability assessment has a range of sites. It's normal and expected that not every site that's tested will be viable. The judgment is about where you set that threshold for affordable housing. So the question, I guess, would be, is within this site, what are the high level costs? So, I can see in front, there's a range of sites listed that have kind of verified costs with and without abnormals, it adds anywhere between 8 to 15%. That's quite a good wide range of costs. I'm not super familiar with all of these sites, but I'd say how relevant are they to this site in question? Similarly with the needed residential capacity, I think it's just a kind of schematic outline. I think there are disagreements between the council and the landowner about what is reasonably achieved. But these are just what I'm saying, the things that I had said, you know, when I was speaking to the council, well, if they've been brought forward by the council at Reg 18 or Reg 19, these are the types of things that I would have asked about. Yeah. So I think I'm just trying to be, as you know, through a local plan, it can happen in examination, but I would be remiss if I didn't raise questions I would have had 2 years ago.
And the problem is that the way that you can address those issues and those legitimate questions is more time limited, and because this isn't a plan making process we're in now, we're in an examination process. So it brings me to what the realistic choices are about if I conclude it isn't sound as it is, how it can be modified. So
and that's why I'm saying I wouldn't want to suggest that we want to see loads of things. I go back to kind of what's appropriate as a reasonable prospect in the context of a developable site, knowing that the council is going to be, I think, proposing modifications around their affordable housing thresholds.
I might find out this evening, I think.
We're all waiting.
It's on the website.
So we should finish up so we can.
Got ways to go.
But yet, in that context, I appreciate it's a difficult situation, but I think it's going back to have things substantially changed since the plan was submitted. Yes, there is kind of additional considerations in the statement from kind of the GLA's point of view, and if we have enough information to actually strategically balance taking a view on this, I think based on the information in front of me, unfortunately not in terms of kind of being able to agree. Yes, this seems the most sensible approach, or a sensible approach. We simply lack the information to justify it, I guess.
And just go back to what the process is then. So I ultimately make a decision about this, having looked at the GW3 and the exceptional circumstance, and then you have the opportunity to object to the modification, and I have then the chance to consider that. And I suppose you also have the option of saying it's a general conformity issue. But again, even if you were to say that, ultimately that judgment's for me, is it?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. No, and I think that's why I appreciate being invited to come.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'd rather
get it all out.
Give you an initial view.
Absolutely, yeah.
Hit all the points about conformity. I really don't like to just kind of throw that on people that may want to.
Well, could it be a general conformity issue? In the way that you describe strategically releasing land mall for housing.
So I think obviously there's certain issue, obviously, when you're thinking about general conformity, you have to think of the plan as a whole, and you have to think about, does it put the implementation of the London plan as a whole at risk? It is quite a high bar, but also on the same time, when you think about the policy protection afforded to MOL and the importance of that and the implications that quite a chunky release might perhaps come through a hearing process, I think it would be something we'd have to think about very carefully, because I think that is fundamentally, as I said, none of us are in disagreement that we want gas holder sites to come forward. For housing, I think is part of what the London plan says. None of us are in disagreement with that. The question we're discussing is, are those additional public benefits? Again, I would say none of us would disagree that sports facilities and accessible open space are a good thing. Does that outweigh the loss of the MOL?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, right, thank you. I think we've explored it. I mean, I suppose the other thing about all this is we've got, I've got another set of figures from the, hopefully I have, in response to my latest question about variability. So we can look again at what the different scenarios that I've outlined in that are for this site and see where it falls within the sort of hierarchy of relative viability or unviable, bearing in mind that there are other things that haven't been factored into that, which we've got evidence of, not costed evidence, but we can. I think that's fairly clear that says, well, whatever that BNB analysis says, it's probably optimistic because it hasn't factored in these site-specific issues.
Yeah, and I think, as I said, I've looked at it briefly, and I would agree. And I guess again, the question comes down to there would be a trade-off there between the levels of affordable housing and, for example, MOL as well. So it comes back to it's all interlinked.
Yeah, and that's.
But there are other options for enabling the site to come forward in terms of the policy choices that the council as decision maker would have to make should an application be forthcoming on the site, which could be a lower level of housing.
Yeah, and some of the other policies.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's just, so we haven't disregarded that.
Okay, thank you. Right, it's nearly, well, it's 5 o'clock, isn't it? So it's after 5 o'clock. So is there anything else anybody wishes to say about this? Do you want to?
I only just wanted to add that it's not just the cricket pitch, and that the accessibility levels are really poor in this area. And if I would direct you to our evidence-based EB063 on page 59, you can see that half the site is in deficit of all publicly accessible open space, with only the southern part within a local park buffer. So it's the red hash, which is the worst, which is again coming back to the original idea of bringing forward this site. One of the key benefits was going to be the publicly accessible green space. So it's not only is across the borough, but it is in this particular area as well. I just wanted to highlight that.
Okay, so that it's the way to that, and the cricket pitch element is, I think, secondary, isn't it, really, in terms of whether a cricket pitch is
strategic need for the borough. Yeah.
But given, okay. So I think we've taken that as far as we can. I think we do need to look at it. We will need to look at it again. How and when we do that, I'll have to have a think about. I suppose. Well, I won't say anymore now because it's late and I don't need to think about it. But if this is going to be taken further, there is a need to think about what the modification would be to the policy and the site map, etc., if this land were to be released, because then some of that is known that they are relevant to the exceptional circumstances balancing anyways. So maybe the thing is for me to do I haven't made my mind up yet on a hypothetical basis, if this were to be released, what would the policy end up looking like? So maybe that's the best way to think about that. And whether, yes.
Just on that, so I guess the mapping has been done as part of this Stone Common Ground.
Yeah.
So that has identified the deallocation and, in essence, then the revised
development
designation.
Yeah.
Yes. There is so that's the MOL. The green space designation remains. So that then we have this kind of hook to optimise green space on that part of the development, which is part of the Stone Common Ground as well. So that kind of just adds, I guess, a degree of extra pressure to kind of green that space up. We propose a series of modifications to site allocation, different wording, but ultimately the policy still works as it's currently drafted in terms of text form.
Okay, I've not brought about it.
Yeah, it just relates to the development area, which would exclude MOL. So broadly, the most fundamental thing is the boundary of the MOL, and then everything else kind of could remain.
Okay, well, the council may or may not agree with that. I don't know, but
I think we just want to look at it.
Look at
because
it,
I think there's stuff that we maybe want to reinstate.
Okay, but I suppose we have got some reserve days, but it's only 2 weeks' time. So I suppose the question would be, could something be prepared for consideration then? Is that, given what you've just said, like we don't think pretty much needed, and so that's doable. So okay, so that may be we might be looking at this again after I've reflected on what we've talked about today, and also in the context of whatever's happened with viability and the affordable housing requirements. how that then looks at the viability picture for a site such as this, etc. So things can move on again. So
Yeah, and I think that would be helpful, which is why I prefer coming in person to talk.
yeah, sure, yeah, I mean, it's appreciated. It's helpful.
Because I assumed there were other things in play, so yes, we're fine with that.
Are you available that week? Then it'll be
Which week is it?
2 weeks time.
I believe it's the same week as the affordable housing.
Yes, it would be. We've got.
We have, so.
Yeah, I mean, I've got theoretically 3 reserve days that week. At the moment, we've only got affordable housing definitely on the agenda. I think there probably will be some other bits and pieces to pick up.
That's the 17th, so.
It will. Yes, Tuesday the 17th is the first day. So.
No, I think it's my viability colleague who would attend on viability specific.
If
I can make it. It's not just that.
Okay, thank you. Right, so we'll finish that for today. Now we've got a choice, I think, for the council and me, because no one else is involved in this. I don't think is whether we deal with the waste policies now, or we leave it till tomorrow on the basis that tomorrow we might have more time. Who knows? I don't mind.
Deal with it now. I mean, the rest of the team go back upstairs if I want to.
Let's get it done. I don't have a great deal, but it's the main. So let's have 5 minutes while people can move back up, whatever, and then because we've got the room, all right.
I think so. There's a subcommittee coming in like 5 minutes or so.
It's not the cabinet coming in here, are they?
Hope not. Might get fired.
So can I just ask on those reserve days?
Yes.
When would you issue your kind of proposed agenda?
Next week.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to do. It's on reflection. Maybe it's better to have a slightly bigger gap, but we'll try and keep things going at pace. So I'll try and do I will do some action points from this week, but not necessarily the end of the story.
Yeah.
And then those action points will then determine what is added to the agenda, in addition to what I know is already on, which is affordable housing, based on assumption we get a council response.
Okay.
So yeah, agenda next week. Can't say which day, but before the end of next week.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I think there might be a mistake on the middle two. 35%.
Oh.
With employment and training, with no employment and training. The figures seem to be the wrong way around. They go up on the one that should go down.
So which percent, sorry, the 35?
35. If you look at the 60 and the 20,
Yeah.
With employment and training and with no employment and training contribution, the figures go in the direction you expect them to, i.e. viability improves. And on 35%, I think the columns are the wrong, the figures go in the wrong direction.
Okay.
What's the column? On the Excel columns.
F and
It's all right, guys. It's just between the two tabs.
Yeah, so we can get a revised
I think,
percent.
yeah.
written.
A situation whereby we've got the Eastland Joint Waste Plan that was adopted in 2012 being replaced. It's been Reg 19 consultation last year.
Yeah, it was submitted last Friday.
Right.
So I don't know, we haven't heard back from the inspector yet, but touch wood, it's all good.
Do your pre-examination checklist?
We did, yes.
Okay.
No.
Was that helpful?
Outstanding 1 or 2 SOCGs, but there aren't that many in the first place, so hopefully it will go.
Right, okay. So that's been submitted. So when that is adopted, that will supersede the 2012 plan in its entirety.
Yes.
Yeah. Now the policies map, the adopted policies map reflects your local plan and also the adopted waste.
Yeah, so the current 2018 local plan policies map reflects the 2012 joint waste plan.
Yeah.
So
that's yes, that's what I'd expect. Okay. Yeah. So when this plan's adopted, you'll update the policies map.
I think we would be happy to. I mean, at the moment,
not about waste. You'll adopt the policies map to reflect everything that's a consequence of this plan.
Yes, yes.
When the joint waste plan is adopted, the Newham policies map will be updated again to reflect whatever comes out of that.
Yeah, I mean, if we're able to do that, I think that would be the preference. Yeah, if we could do that outside of this process.
But we can. That is the case. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So what this plan does, in terms of the policies map, is preempting what may or may not come out of the joint waste plan because it's putting on the draft allocations that I'm not examining for safeguarding, etc.
Yeah, so it reflects. It doesn't. It's currently not reflective of like the most up to date list of safeguarded sites we've got because when we published the Reg 19, we hadn't yet gone out for Reg 18, I think, on the joint waste plan. So it reflects an evidence base that we did to inform what sites we have in the borough. But we've sought to include some flexibility in the justification text to say that as the joint waste plan progresses through its, various stages of examination, that we would, that when the new joint waste plan is adopted, that would effectively supersede the layers on the proposed map that we've got at the moment.
Yeah.
The local plan.
But I think the policies map associated with this plan shouldn't touch the waste sites.
Okay.
They remain as they are in the adopted plan until they're superseded by the adopted.
Well, they are currently, I suppose the one thing that's in play with the waste sites is that they are safeguarded as well by the London plan policy at the moment that safeguards all waste sites with a permit. So we just wanted the policies map to kind of, I guess, give more information to applicants about whether or not we think that there would be a waste site on their sites. It's obviously a much more extensive list.
Okay.
Than we had before in 2012.
I think it just needs to be left as the adopted plan.
Okay.
And then if people want to see how that will be amended, presumably the submitted plan, joint waste plan that's been submitted, would show how the Newham policy.
Yeah, we could do that. Yeah.
So it's because it does cause confusion. Okay. So I think that deals with that element. The next more fundamental point, I suppose, is why is this plan got any policies on waste in it at all?
That makes sense. I mean, at the time, at the time we drafted it, it was before, I think we'd gone out for consultation on the Reg 18 joint waste plan, if I remember correctly. So we wanted to cover off waste and issues that we felt were of importance to Newham in terms of, successfully managing waste uses in the borough. We've had some cases where we've had enforcement action taken on some waste sites, and in particular issues that we've captured in CW2, for example, about mud and track out onto the highway and how those sorts of things can be avoided to increase safety. And then in terms of Newham's developments, each of the boroughs have their own sort of guidance for how waste management should be organised in developments. And policy W3 at the moment reflects kind of Newham's expectation that new developments brought forward in the borough should be designed in accordance with our waste management guidelines. And there's nothing fundamentally contradictory between what we've got in the draft local plan and what we've got emerging in the joint waste plan. So we don't necessarily see there's a conflict there between the two documents.
No. Okay, well, we'll go through each of them. So there may not be a conflict, but it is as it is. So I only require a modification if it's necessary to make it sound. So if there isn't any inconsistency, it just seemed to me that you've got the London plan waste policies, and you can have these joint ones. And if the joint ones are any different to yours, they'll probably adopt it after these, so they'd supersede them in that sense. But I mean, okay. Right, okay. So, right, so in terms of W1 waste management capacity, again, I mean, this surely is a topic that the joint waste plan will deal with in more detail than this.
Yes, it will. I mean, it's kind of providing a bit of a stopgap to reflect that changes as per the London plan.
But you've got the adopted plan, which presumably
the adopted plan safeguards only about, I think in Newham, about 3 waste sites at the moment, maybe slightly more. Whereas obviously since when the 2012 plan was prepared, I think my understanding is that it was more about meeting your capacity needs as an area. So you'd safeguard 5 or 6 biggest sites that you had to meet your waste and risings. Whereas now the London plan's a lot more stringent about releasing capacity because it wants to achieve net self-sufficiency across London.
But that London plan applies, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
And it applies irrespective of whether they're safeguarded in an adopted plan.
Yes.
Is it? Yes. Okay. So, part 3 of W1. Again, it's confusing in the sense that it's saying that all waste sites in Newham will be safeguarded, but they will only. That isn't. I mean, what Canning Town Depot say? They say, well, that needs to be modified to say unless they are not safeguarded in the updated joint waste plan.
Yeah.
So that you wouldn't be looking to safeguard a site in Newham that doesn't get through the joint plan.
No, exactly. And that's why we put in the implementation text for W3. We're updating the adopted East London Joint Waste Plan. And sorry, maybe it's not in that one. Yeah, it says the list of sites that will be safeguarded will be updated through the various plan making stages, the production of the joint East London Waste Plan. So it effectively tries to kind of capture that changing picture as we move through. Well, I get that.
But it's not really necessary, is it? Because, anyway, but if you took the example of the Canning Town Depot, that's not safeguarded in the adopted plan.
It's not, but it is safeguarded by the London plan.
In what sense?
In the sense that the London plan safeguards all waste management sites currently in use.
Okay. Well, whether that London plan policy gets that will be taken into account in this joint waste plan.
Yes.
So the joint waste plan may or may not have put a line around every single site that's in some waste management use. on the basis that's what the London plan is trying to do. And I'm just, but if it does, that's not for me to consider. It's for the joint waste plan examination to consider whether that's justified.
Yes.
Yeah. So again, it reinforces you shouldn't be putting a draft evidence-based safeguarding site on the policies map when this plan's adopted in advance of it being through the joint waste plan examination.
I mean, we've sort of labelled them on the policies map as sites identified in the evidence base, so they're not listed as like safeguarded sites on the policies map. I do get confusion, but we did try and make that distinction because we're not saying those are the definitive safeguarded sites. It's just trying to indicate that London plan policy currently does apply.
So part 3, W1, doesn't do anything more than London plan does.
No.
But that will all be subject to a more recent policy in the joint waste plan.
Yeah, so there's one site in Newham that we're looking to release through the new joint waste plan, and there's a couple of others across East London.
But the Canning Town depot
isn't one of them.
So your position and the position of the joint authorities is, having looked at strategically, that, I'm not going to go through what Canning Town depot have said, but what they've argued in their statement to me, they will no doubt elaborate on in their statement to the examination for the joint plan.
Yeah, I'm sure they will, yeah.
And that then will lead to a conclusion as to whether that particular site should be safeguarded or not.
Yes.
And that will be the end of that process.
Yeah.
So, and that will supersede what the London plan is seeking to do, which is a sort of strategic approach, safeguard everything.
Yeah. But
that would always be the knowledge that would be subject to any local plans that put lines on maps, etc.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so it reinforces to me that W1 is, well, because if it wasn't there, what would be lost? In the context of London plan and then when the joint waste plan's adopted.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a question that I was prepared for today, so I probably have to look at the policies comprehensively and see which bits were different to what was set out in the London plan. I think there's definitely a desire in the borough to indicate that we strongly support the principles of the circular economy and the waste hierarchy, that flows through the London plan, but it's something that, as the London plan gets updated, it's a sort of, interlinks with the climate policies as well, I suppose, a little bit, but, we want to make sure those principles are, clearly stated by us.
I mean, there's nothing in national policy or legislation that prevents a local plan having waste policies in it, if there's a waste plan as well.
Yeah.
It's not normally done. It's not normally necessary.
I mean, we've got a waste policy in our current adopted local plan that was adopted after the joint waste plan was adopted. If that makes sense.
Okay. Well, it seems to me that W1 in particular is the territory of the joint waste plan.
Yeah.
But let's leave that. But the substantive issue in terms of what it's safeguarding, I suppose part 3. Part 3 isn't inconsistent with the London plan, but as I say, it could get superseded when the joint waste plans. So I suppose what Canning Town depot say to modify it by saying unless they are not safeguarding the updated joint waste local plan, or where part 4 of the policy is satisfied,
well, I suppose
would be out for clarification, and then it'd be factually correct.
Yeah, I mean, I guess when reading the rep from Canning Town depot, I mean, fundamentally, whether you change the policy wording or not, it's still safeguarded via that site will still be safeguarded by the new London plan. So I think
until this happens, where the joint waste plan's adopted, in which case that would in effect supersede the blanket protection in the London plan.
Yes, it would, yeah.
Which is all that this is saying.
Yeah.
That suggestion, isn't it? Yeah. So W1, I think we can deal with the Canning Town depot by possibly doing that modification, and the policies map being waiting until, I think. And then when we come on to W2, again, what is this adding to the London plan and what the new joint waste plan will do? Because it might add some Newham specific that aren't dealt with in the joint waste plan.
Yeah, no.
Are you one of the officers working on the joint?
I am, yeah.
Yeah. So, So it is it's owned by the council. It's not being done to you by.
No, we're very much part of it.
Yeah. So I won't put it on the spot then.
No. I think yeah. In terms of this particular policy W2, most of the part one are sort of principles that are put forward within the London plan and the bits that are captured by the Information Joint Waste Plan. I don't think there's any fundamental conflicts there. I guess part 3 is kind of, I would say that's an important Newham specific policy because it's responding to issues that we've had on waste sites where mud and track out can cause a danger to local residents and can be a really significant amenity issue. And whilst there is some overlap with what the Environment Agency do in terms of, looking at the safety of sites, a lot of the times, I think from experience previously of having worked in enforcement, is that regime doesn't always necessarily effectively cover some of these issues about layout and about, vehicles coming in, they've got dirty wheels when they come in, making sure that they're clean when they leave, and that, that there's good management in place. And I think it's not unreasonable for that to be looked at a design stage when the site comes forward rather than dealt with reactively when things start to go wrong.
So you're saying that part 3 in particular adds more detail on the joint waste?
Yeah.
Okay. And that may be the case of that policy generally?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So let's move on to waste 3 then. Is that the same here then?
So this has some new and specific requirements in it again. So it largely reflects the advice of our local waste team in the council. So I think the joint waste plan, if I remember correctly, it does sort of direct. It does talk a little bit about the quality of waste management in new developments coming forward, but each borough will have their own waste management teams that like things done a particular way in terms of collection. So yeah, this picks up on a lot of those points that our waste recycling team think are important. And then we also have this requirement about reuse and circular economy rooms that we've got some management guidance about in our updated waste management guidelines for developers. So I think I'm saying a lot. So yeah, and also the parts about service charges to businesses, that's again something that's been recommended by our waste teams based on implementation. So yeah, in terms of, I think I take a point about W1 and potential overlap with the joint waste plan, but a lot of this is responding to, new and specific advice. We won't want to lose it.
No, okay, understood. No, that's fine. And then, okay, so and the only other one I'd got on the agenda was the mod to the automated vacuum waste collection system. So that brings in viability as a...
Yes.
It doesn't bring in whether it's practicable or feasible or whatever. Is that...
I think that we would say that would probably be captured under whether or not it's viable. I mean, if it's not feasible to dig up an entire site because it would create a big stress on viability, then I think that would kind of capture that in the round.
And the allocations that you propose mods to, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
They're the only ones that have that requirement in.
Yes.
And that's back to their scale. It was like over 500 or whatever.
Yeah.
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 That's as simple as that. Yeah.
Yeah, and we did also look at the viability. So I think there were a few sites that were over that threshold where they had a more significant impact on viability. So we didn't include those ones.
Okay, it's fine. Right. I think let's, okay, I take the points about waste 2 and 3. I think W1, you have to think about, I will think about. I think it does, certainly the policies map, I think.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
It's actually for you to decide what the policies map, but
yeah.
I don't think.
I just think on that point and kind of vaguely remembering what was sort of said in the representation, I just think as long as it's clear to developers moving forward that it's not just the 2012 joint waste plan sites that are safeguarded, that it is across that Royal London point, London plan point comes in about safeguarding of waste sites, then I think we'd be happy to make changes.
In the interim until the joint waste plans.
Yeah, exactly.
Which probably won't be, well, we don't know when it'll be, but it'd be massively long examination.
No, I think probably, if I was being optimistic, maybe by the end of the year.
Okay. Fine, okay, well, I'll have a think about ways to W1 and, what that's. Okay, right, anything else? No, good, okay, well, we've covered quite a lot. Longest day yet, I think, isn't it? Latest finish. Okay. So back tomorrow. So yeah, sorry, going back to that viability note, I think if the explanation is just those columns are the wrong way around, just double check. We can just, it just seems to be the numbers are in the wrong direction. So, okay. Are BNP coming tomorrow?
Yes,
Yeah,
they are.
okay.
Yeah.
So
To cover any viability issues
yeah,
or concerns.
and did we haven't got a morning afternoon break, have we? I don't think.
No, so they come in the EM because we have got that break.
Yeah. So yeah, okay, they'll be around. So we've got Galleons Reach first and transport. Well, who mentioned there's a transport policy that someone was coming for? Oh, I was in the chat. It's okay. Right, okay, so I'll see you all in the morning. Thank you.
Yeah.